Rain hammered the glass tower of Hanul Private Medical Center like bullets fired from the sky. On the 37th floor, a floor that did not appear on any public directory, machines screamed warnings. Red lights pulsed. Doctors in surgical masks sprinted through corridors sealed by armed men in black suits. A 6-year-old boy lay dying. His small body convulsed beneath sterile white sheets. His lips had turned the color of ash. His blood pressure plummeted toward numbers that meant only one thing. Standing motionless at the foot of the bed, untouched by the chaos, was a man who made presidents nervous and crime lords kneel. Kang Jae-hyun, the Shadow King, billionaire, sovereign of Korea's deepest underworld. A man whose silence had ended empires. He never panicked. Yet tonight, his tattooed knuckles had turned white against the hospital railing, the black serpent inked across his fingers coiling tight as if alive. His son was slipping away. Then a nurse burst through the sealed doors carrying a temperature-controlled medical container stamped with a red cross and a donor code. The blood is here. 60 seconds after transfusion began, the monitors shifted. Heart rate, stabilizing. Oxygen levels, rising. Color returned to the boy's face like dawn breaking over a frozen landscape. Kang Min-jun lived. Again. For the 47th time in 4 years, anonymous donor blood had pulled his son from the edge of death. Jae-hyun released the railing. He straightened his black suit jacket. The dragon tattoo climbing his neck flexed beneath his jaw as he turned to the chief physician and spoke in a voice that carried the weight of an avalanche. Who is she? The doctor hesitated. The donor program is anonymous, sir. I didn't ask about the program. Jae-hyun's dark eyes locked onto the man with surgical precision. I asked who is she? Because somewhere in Seoul, a woman had unknowingly been saving his son's life every single month. And Kang Jae-hyun was going to find her. Before we continue this story, which I promise will take you on a journey you won't forget, take a moment to think about the people in your life who sacrifice for you without ever asking for recognition. Sometimes love operates in silence, in the background, in the margins of our lives. And sometimes the most powerful connections are the ones we don't even know exist yet. Backhand index pointing right, please like, share, and subscribe. Now, let me tell you how it all began. 6 hours earlier. The alarm on Amara Okafor's phone went off at 5:14 a.m., not 5:15, because she had learned years ago that one stolen minute could mean the difference between a perfect croissant and a burned one. She rose in the dark. Her studio apartment in Mapogu was barely large enough to fit a bed, a clothing rack, and a narrow kitchen counter she used for recipe testing. The walls were thin. She could hear her neighbor's television playing a Korean drama rerun. The ceiling had a water stain shaped like the African continent that she sometimes stared at when homesickness became unbearable. Amara washed her face with cold water. She braided her hair into a single plait, applied shea butter to her hands that cracked from years of kitchen work, and pulled on her flour-dusted apron. By 5:40 she was walking through the pre-dawn streets of Seoul toward her cafe. Ao's Kitchen. Named after her late mother. The cafe occupied a tiny corner space between a laundromat and a phone repair shop in a neighborhood where foot traffic was modest and rent was barely affordable. The sign above the door, hand-painted in warm gold and burnt orange, read the name in both English and Korean. Amara unlocked the door, flipped on the lights, and began her ritual. Flour, sugar, butter, yeast. Her hands moved with memory. Nigerian chin-chin dough twisted alongside Korean hotteok batter. Puff-puff sat rising in bowls next to red bean pastries. Her cafe was a bridge between two worlds, African warmth meeting Korean precision, and every item on the menu carried a piece of her heart. By 7:30 the first customers arrived. A university student who came every Tuesday for meat pies. An elderly Korean woman who had once told Amara her sweet potato bread reminded her of something her own mother used to make. A delivery driver who never ordered anything but sat for 10 minutes in the warmth before returning to the cold. Amara served them all with the same quiet grace. She remembered names. She remembered orders. She asked about sick relatives and upcoming exams. She gave extra portions to those who looked hungry and charged less to those who looked broke. She did all of this while carrying a weight no one could see. Later that morning, at 11 a.m., Amara hung her apron behind the kitchen door and told her only employee, a part-time college student named Soo-yeon, that she would be back in 2 hours. Appointment? Soo-yeon asked. Donation day, Amara said simply. She walked 14 blocks to the Hanul Medical Donor Center, a modern building attached to a much larger private hospital complex she had never entered. She checked in at the front desk, filled out her monthly forms, and sat in the sterile waiting room with 5 other donors. The nurse who called her name, Nurse Cho, had been drawing her blood for nearly 4 years. Amara-sai, Nurse Cho said warmly. Right on schedule. Always, Amara smiled. She sat in the donation chair, rolled up her sleeve, looked away as the needle slipped in, not because she was afraid but because she had learned to detach from the small pains. She had survived so many larger ones. Your blood type is truly remarkable, Nurse Cho said, monitoring the flow. Do you know how rare your combination is? You tell me every month, Amara said gently. Because it's worth repeating. Rh-null phenotype with a specific antigen compatibility we almost never see. In the entire Korean medical database, only your blood matches the recipient profile for one particular patient. Amara's brow furrowed slightly. One patient. Nurse Cho caught herself. I've said too much. Forget I mentioned it. But the words lingered. One particular patient. Amara didn't press further. She needed the donation stipend. 80,001 per session. Barely enough to cover a week of flour and sugar for the cafe, but it kept the doors open. Kept the lights on. It kept her mother's name alive on that hand-painted sign. When the donation was complete, Amara pressed the cotton ball against her inner arm, accepted the juice box offered to her, and walked back out into the Seoul afternoon. She did not see the security camera in the hallway adjust its angle to follow her as she left. She did not notice the black sedan parked across the street. And she certainly did not know that within hours, her blood would be rushed to the 37th floor of the building she had never entered, where it would be transfused into the veins of a dying boy. A boy whose father would soon become the most dangerous man in her life. That same night, after the crisis, the rain had not stopped. Kang Jae-hyun stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of the private hospital suite, looking down at the city that feared him. Seoul glittered below like scattered diamonds, beautiful and cold. His reflection stared back at him, sharp jawline, dark eyes that revealed nothing, the collar of his black shirt open just enough to expose the dragon tattoo coiling up the left side of his neck, its scales rendered in meticulous black and gray ink that caught the fluorescent light. Behind him, his son slept. Minjun's chest rose and fell in the steady rhythm of medically induced rest. And 4 drip fed medication into his tiny arm. Monitors beeped in calm intervals. The crisis had passed. This time. Jaehyun's chief of security, a broad-shouldered man named Baek Sung-ho, entered without knocking. Only 3 people in the world were permitted to do that. Sung-ho was one. Sir. You asked about the donor. Jaehyun did not turn from the window. And? The program is protected by medical privacy laws. Director Han refused to release the file. Director Han's daughter attends Yonsei University on a scholarship funded by the Kang Foundation. Jaehyun's voice was flat. Not threatening. Simply stating a geography of power. Remind him. Sir, with respect, if we push too hard, the donor program could flag the inquiry. If the donor becomes aware. I'm not asking for your analysis. Jaehyun turned. The full weight of his presence, the tattooed hand resting calmly at his side, the stillness that made grown men stammer, settled over the room. My son has been dying for 6 years. 47 transfusions. 47 times this woman's blood has been the only thing between him and a grave. I want to know who she is. I want to know where she lives. I want to know why her blood is the only match on earth. He paused. And I want to know by morning. Sung-ho bowed his head. Yes, sir. He left. Jaehyun walked to Minjun's bedside. He pulled a chair close. Sat down. And for a long time he simply watched his son breathe. The boy looked like his mother. The same delicate features. The same gentle mouth. The same quiet way of existing that made you want to protect him from every sharp corner the world had to offer. Jaehyun reached out and touched his son's hair. The tattooed serpent on his wrist slid into view, patient, coiled, deadly, a stark contrast to the tenderness of the gesture. I will find her, he whispered. Whoever she is. Whatever it takes. He did not sleep that night. He rarely did. The next morning. Sung-ho delivered the file at 6:47 a.m. It was thin. A single donor profile printed on medical center letterhead, accompanied by 3 surveillance photographs taken from the hallway cameras. Jaehyun opened the folder on the mahogany conference table in his private office, the 62nd floor of Kang Industries Tower, a building that overlooked Seoul like a dark sentinel. The first photograph showed a woman walking through the medical center lobby. She was caught mid-stride, her posture straight despite obvious fatigue. She wore a simple olive green jacket. Her braided hair fell over one shoulder. She carried herself with the quiet dignity of someone accustomed to hardship but unbowed by it. The second photograph was closer. The security camera had captured her face as she looked up toward the elevator indicator. Her eyes were large, warm, and deeply expressive, the kind of eyes that held entire conversations without words. Her skin was rich and deep brown, smooth as polished mahogany. There was flour dust on her collar. The third photograph showed her leaving. Cotton ball taped to her inner elbow. Juice box in hand. A small, tired smile on her face as she thanked someone off camera. Jaehyun studied each image for a long time. Then he read the file. Name, Amara Okafor. Nationality, Nigerian. Age, 29. Occupation, self-employed. Bakery/cafe owner. Address, Mapogu. Seoul. Blood type, Rh null with HLA. Specific antigen compatibility, ultra-rare. Donor status, active monthly donor. 47 consecutive donations. 0 missed appointments. Medical notes. Donor has been informed her blood supports a single anonymous recipient but has not been given identifying details. Jaehyun closed the file. He placed his tattooed hand flat on the folder. The peony flowers inked across his knuckles, symbols of hidden emotional wounds, seemed to bloom against the paper. Amara Okafor, he said quietly, testing the name in his mouth. It felt like a secret he had been waiting to learn. An hour later, Jaehyun stood in front of the mirror in his private dressing room at Kong Tower. He adjusted his charcoal Tom Ford suit. The shirt beneath was black, unbuttoned precisely 2 buttons, enough to expose the storm clouds tattooed across his collarbone and the beginning of the dragon's tail curling toward his chest. His personal assistant, a sharp, efficient woman named Park Yuna, waited by the door. Cancel the afternoon meetings, Jaehyun said. Yuna blinked. In 7 years of service he had never cancelled afternoon meetings. All of them, sir? All of them. May I ask? You may not. He took a black car, not the armored SUV, not the convoy, just a single sedan with tinted windows, and drove across Seoul toward Mapogu. The city blurred past. Glass towers gave way to older neighborhoods. The streets narrowed. The buildings shrank. The world transformed from corporate power to human warmth in a matter of kilometers. The sedan stopped across the street from a small corner cafe. Ao's Kitchen. Jaehyun did not get out of the car. He sat in the back seat, window cracked 2 inches, and watched. Through the cafe window he could see her. Amara moved behind the counter with fluid grace, boxing pastries for a customer, laughing at something someone said, wiping her hands on her apron before reaching up to adjust a jar on a high shelf. The interior of the cafe was small but radiant. Warm lighting, mismatched chairs, handwritten menu boards, a shelf of cookbooks beside a small potted plant. It looked like love built into a room. Jaehyun watched for 23 minutes. He did not understand why he could not look away. He had seen beauty before. He had possessed beauty before. Women of extraordinary elegance had orbited his world for years. Socialites, models, the daughters of powerful men seeking alliance through marriage. None of them had made him feel what he was feeling now, which was something dangerously close to curiosity. Not about her beauty. About her. About the kind of person who donates blood every month for 4 years without missing once. About the kind of person who names a struggling cafe after her mother. About the kind of person who carries flour dust and fatigue with equal grace. His phone buzzed. A message from Sung-ho. Minjun is awake. Asking for you. Jaehyun looked at the cafe one last time. Then he told his driver to take him back to the hospital. But something had shifted. A mechanism inside him, something rusted and long dormant, had begun to turn. Hanul Private Medical Center. That afternoon, Minjun sat up in bed, small legs dangling over the edge, watching a cartoon on the wall-mounted screen with the volume turned low. He was 6 years old, but his eyes carried the patience of someone much older, a child who had spent more of his life inside hospitals than outside them. When Jaehyun entered the room, Minjun's face brightened immediately. Appa. The word landed on Jaehyun like sunlight hitting stone. He crossed the room in 3 strides and knelt beside the bed so his face was level with his son's. The dragon on his neck twisted as he tilted his head, studying the boy's complexion, his color, the strength in his small hands. How do you feel? Tired? Minjun said honestly. Then, with the devastating directness only children possess. I almost died again, didn't I? Jaehyun's jaw tightened. The dragon scales beneath his ear flexed. You're here, he said. That's what matters. Because of the Blood Lady. Jaehyun paused. The Blood Lady? Nurse Cho told me once that a special person gives me blood every month. She called her, The donor. But I call her the blood lady. Minjun looked at his father with curious eyes. Do you think she knows about me? No, Jaehyun said quietly. She doesn't. That's sad, Minjun said. She saves me but she doesn't even know my name. Don't you think she should know? The question, innocent, devastating, lodged itself beneath Jaehyun's ribs like a blade. Maybe, he said. Someday. Minjun nodded, accepting this the way children accept all promises from parents they trust completely. Then he asked, Can I have hadiak? The hospital food tastes like paper. A ghost of a smile crossed Jaehyun's face. I'll have some brought. Not from a fancy restaurant, Minjun added seriously. From a real place. A small place. With a nice ajumma. Jaehyun said nothing. But he thought of flour dust on a collar and a hand-painted sign. 3 days later. Amara was arranging the display case. Chin-chin cookies on the left, red bean pastries in the center, fresh puff-puff on the right, when the door chimed. A man in a dark suit entered. He was clearly not from the neighborhood. His shoes alone cost more than her monthly rent. He wore an earpiece. His posture was rigid and alert, the stance of someone trained to assess threats in every room. Can I help you? Amara asked. I'd like to place an order, the man said. 12 hadiak. 6 meat pies. Assorted pastries. Packaged for transport. Amara raised an eyebrow. That's a large order. Having a party? Something like that. She prepared the order with care, boxing everything neatly, adding napkins and the small thank you cards she included with every purchase. Hand-stamped with a tiny heart. The man paid in cash. Exact change. Left without a receipt. Amara watched him get into a black sedan parked across the street. The same spot where, though she didn't know it, another black sedan had been parked 3 days ago. She shrugged and went back to work. Hanul Private Medical Center. That evening. Minjun opened the first box and his eyes went wide. What is this? He picked up a piece of chin-chin and sniffed it. It smells like magic. Try it, Jaehyun said. He sat in the chair beside the bed, watching his son with the careful attention of a man cataloging moments he feared might not last. Minjun bit into the chin-chin. His face transformed, surprise, then delight, then the specific joy of a child encountering something entirely new and wonderful. Appa. This is the best thing I've ever eaten. Jaehyun looked at the box. The small hand-stamped card sat on top. Thank you for choosing Ao's Kitchen. Made with love. Amara. He picked up the card. Held it between his tattooed fingers. The ink of the peony flowers on his knuckles framed the tiny heart stamp perfectly. Who made this? Minjun asked, already reaching for a meat pie. Someone kind, Jaehyun said. He did not mention that this someone was the same woman whose blood was keeping his son alive. He did not mention that he had sent Sung-ho to buy the food because he wanted to know if she was real, not just a donor file and surveillance photographs, but a person who could make a dying boy smile. She could. That was dangerous information. Because Kang Jae-hyun had spent 6 years building walls around his heart, and this woman, this stranger, was already making cracks he couldn't explain. 5 days later. The private conference room on the 62nd floor of Kang Tower had no windows. It was swept for listening devices twice daily. The table was black granite. The chairs were Italian leather. The lighting was low. 3 men sat at the table. Baek Sung-ho, chief of security. Dr. Yoon Tae-sik, Minjun's primary hematologist. And Director Han Myung-chul, head of the Hanul Medical Donor Program, who was perspiring despite the room's precise climate control. Jaehyun stood at the head of the table. He had not sat down. Standing was a choice. It reminded everyone in the room of the difference between his altitude and theirs. Dr. Yoon, Jaehyun said. Explain the blood condition. Completely. Assume I know nothing. Dr. Yoon cleared his throat. Minjun suffers from a hereditary condition we've classified as congenital hemolytic syndrome type 7. C7. It is extraordinarily rare. His body periodically destroys its own red blood cells in acute hemolytic episodes. When an episode occurs, he requires an immediate transfusion of compatible blood. Without it, the doctor paused. He dies. Within hours. And why is this woman the only match? Her blood type is Rh-null, sometimes called golden blood, because fewer than 50 known individuals worldwide possess it. But beyond that, her HLA antigen profile is uniquely compatible with Minjun's immune system. We have searched international databases. We have tested thousands of samples. No other donor on Earth produces blood his body will accept without triggering catastrophic rejection. The room was silent. Jaehyun let the silence work. So my son's life, he said slowly, depends entirely on one woman. A woman who runs a struggling cafe in Mapogu. A woman who is paid 80,000 won per donation. A woman who could stop donating at any moment, get sick, leave the country, simply decide she's done, and my son would die. Dr. Yoon swallowed. That is an accurate summary, yes. Jaehyun turned to director Han. Why was I never told the donor was a single individual? Han's hands were shaking. The program guarantees anonymity. I fund the program. The words fell like a guillotine blade. Han flinched. Sir, you fund the hospital wing, yes, but the donor program operates under independent ethical. My son has been one missed appointment away from death for 4 years. And you maintained ethical protocols. Jaehyun's voice was quiet, almost gentle, which made it infinitely more terrifying. Tell me, would ethics have comforted you at his funeral? Han said nothing. Jaehyun placed both tattooed hands flat on the granite table. The serpent on his right wrist. The tiger clawing up his left forearm. Both visible. Both deliberate. From this moment forward, I want everything. Her medical records. Her financial history. Her daily schedule. Her social connections. Everything that could affect her ability or willingness to continue donating. And I want a medical research team, the best in the world, working on developing a synthetic alternative or a permanent treatment for Minjun's condition. Money is not a factor. Time is. He straightened. One more thing. Everyone waited. She is not to know. Not yet. If she learns she is the sole lifeline for a Mafia sovereign's son, she may panic. She may run. She may be targeted by my enemies. His eyes darkened. Protect her. From a distance. Without her knowledge. He left the room. The 3 men sat in silence for a long time. Finally, Sung-ho spoke. You heard him. Get to work. 2 weeks later. Amara's days followed a rhythm as steady as a heartbeat. 5:14 a.m. Wake. 5:40 a.m. Walk to the cafe. 6:00 a.m. Begin baking. 7:30 a.m. Open doors. 3:00 p.m. Close. 4:00 p.m. Clean. 5:00 p.m. Accounts, shopping, errands. 9:00 p.m. Cook dinner in her small apartment. 10:30 p.m. Call her younger sister, Neka, in Lagos. 11:00 p.m. Sleep. Repeat. She did not have a social life. She did not date. She could not remember the last time she had done something purely for pleasure. But she was surviving. And in a foreign city, 8,000 kilometers from home, for a woman with no family, no safety net, and no guarantee of tomorrow, survival was its own kind of victory. One Tuesday evening. The phone call with Neka lasted longer than usual. Sister, when are you coming home? Neka's voice crackled through the connection, warm and impatient in equal measure. Mama's house is empty. The yard is full of weeds. The neighbors are talking. Let them talk, Amara said, stirring a pot of jollof rice in her cramped kitchen. I'm building something here. Building what? A cafe that barely breaks even? You could come home. Teach baking. Open a shop in Lekki. Auntie Beezy knows someone who. Neka. Amara's voice was gentle but final. Mama told me to go far and build something that outlasts me. That's what I'm doing. Silence on the line. Then, I just miss you. Amara closed her eyes. The ache of homesickness pressed against her chest like a physical weight. She could smell the phantom scent of her mother's kitchen, palm oil and crayfish, and the sound of gospel music floating from a small radio. I miss you too, she whispered. Every single day. After hanging up, she sat at her small table and opened the notebook where she tracked her finances. The numbers told a familiar story. Rent due in 9 days, flour supplier invoice outstanding, Suyun's wages owed for last week. She was 300,000 won short. But next week was donation day. The stipend would close the gap. Barely. She closed the notebook and washed her dishes. She did not notice the unmarked car parked at the end of her street. She did not know that 2 security operatives had been stationed in rotating shifts within visual range of her apartment building since Kang Jae-hyun's order. She did not know that her entire world was about to be overturned. 3 days later. A Saturday afternoon. The cafe was quiet. The lunch rush, such as it was, had passed. Amara was experimenting with a new recipe, a Nigerian-Korean fusion pastry combining sweet plantain with red bean paste in a flaky butter crust. She was so absorbed in the work that she did not hear the door chime. When she looked up, a small boy was standing at the counter. He was alone. He wore a blue coat too large for his thin frame. His hair was neatly combed. His skin was pale, the kind of pale that spoke not of complexion but of illness, of a child who had spent too much time indoors, in beds, in rooms where sunlight came through windows but never truly reached. But his eyes were extraordinary. Dark, intelligent, luminous with a curiosity that seemed to drink the world in through a straw. He was staring at the display case with the reverent focus of a scholar examining sacred texts. "Hello," Amara said, leaning over the counter with a smile. "Are you lost?" The boy shook his head. "I came here on purpose." "By yourself?" He hesitated, the specific hesitation of a child who has done something he knows he shouldn't have but is committed to seeing it through. "My driver is outside," he said carefully. "I told him I wanted to go to the bathroom." "There's a bathroom here, right?" Amara looked past him through the window. A black sedan was double-parked outside. A uniformed driver sat behind the wheel, checking his phone. "There is a bathroom," Amara said. "But I think you came for something else." The boy's eyes returned to the display case. "Is that chin-chin?" Amara's eyebrows rose. "You know what chin-chin is?" "Someone brought it to me once. It was the best thing I ever tasted." The box said it came from here. Something warm expanded in Amara's chest. The particular warmth of knowing your work has mattered to someone. "Would you like some?" she asked. He nodded eagerly. Then his face fell. "I don't have money." Amara was already reaching for a paper bag. "First-time visitors eat free. House rules." "That's not a real rule." "It is now." She filled a bag with chin-chin, added 2 pieces of puff-puff and placed it on the counter. Then, on impulse, she added one of her new experimental plantain red bean pastries. "Try this one and tell me if it's good," she said. "I need an honest opinion." The boy took the bag and bit into the pastry right there at the counter. His eyes widened. "It tastes like 2 countries became friends," he said. Amara laughed, a full, genuine laugh that surprised her. She hadn't laughed like that in months. "What's your name?" she asked. "Minjun." "I'm Amara." "I know," he said. Then catching himself, "I mean, it's on the receipt card." From the box. But the slip lingered. Something in the way he said it, "I know," carried a weight that didn't belong to a 6-year-old. The cafe door chimed again. The driver stood in the doorway, breathing hard, panic visible on his face. "Minjuna. You can't just—" He stopped, noticing Amara. His expression shifted. Something guarded entered his eyes. "I was just getting a snack," Minjun said innocently. The driver looked at the bag. At Amara. At the boy. A complex calculation passed across his face. The calculation of a man who knew exactly whose child this was and exactly what would happen if anything went wrong. "We need to go. Now." Minjun turned back to Amara. "Can I come back?" "Anytime," she said. He smiled. It was the kind of smile that made the world feel, if only for a moment, like a place where nothing bad could happen. Then he was gone. Amara stood behind the counter, holding the warm residue of that smile, and felt something she couldn't name. A connection. Instant and irrational and completely real. She looked at the door where he'd disappeared and whispered to no one, "Who are you, Minjun?" That evening. The driver's report reached Jae-hyun within the hour. He was in his study at the Kang estate, a vast traditional Korean mansion hidden behind walls of stone and steel on the outskirts of Seoul. The room was lined with rare books, Korean artifacts, and a single framed photograph of a woman holding a newborn. The woman's face was serene. She had been dead within hours of the photo being taken. Jae-hyun read the report on his phone. His expression did not change, but the tattoo on his neck, the dragon's jaw, seemed to tighten as his muscles tensed. Minjun had snuck out of the car to visit the cafe. The cafe. Her cafe. He called Sung-ho. The boy was at Ao's kitchen. "I know, sir. I was notified immediately. The driver has been reprimanded." "Don't reprimand him. Minjun is clever. He'll find another way." Pause. "He met her." "Yes. And?" "The interaction lasted approximately 4 minutes. She gave him food. He appeared," Sung-ho chose his word carefully, "happy." Jae-hyun set down the phone. He walked to the window. The estate garden stretched out beneath the moonlight, manicured hedges, stone pathways, a koi pond reflecting stars. Beautiful and controlled. Like everything in his life. Except this. His son, who had never disobeyed a security protocol, had escaped his driver to visit a stranger's cafe because of Chin-chin. And the stranger was the anonymous woman keeping him alive. The coincidence was almost too precise to be coincidence. Jae-hyun did not believe in fate. Fate was a concept for people who lacked the power to shape their own circumstances. He believed in intelligence, leverage, and control. But this, the pull between his son and this woman, the biological miracle of her blood, the hand-painted sign bearing a mother's name, the laugh the driver had described in his report. She laughed, sir. Genuinely. And the boy laughed with her. This felt like something his intelligence, leverage, and control could not explain. It felt like something much older, much deeper, and much more dangerous. The next morning, Jaehyun returned to Mapogu. This time he got out of the car. He stood across the street from Ao's kitchen in a cashmere overcoat, black shirt open at the collar, the storm cloud tattoo visible at the base of his throat. He looked spectacularly out of place, like a panther who had wandered into a garden. He watched her through the window. She was decorating a cake. Her hands moved with the kind of precision that comes not from training but from love, the same precision he recognized in his own world, where every movement carried consequence. A customer left the cafe and held the door open for him, assuming he was entering. He wasn't. But his feet moved before his mind could object. The interior was warmer than he expected. Not just temperature. The warmth was emotional, baked into the walls, emanating from the handwritten quotes taped to the mirror behind the counter, the mismatched mugs, the small radio playing what he recognized as Nigerian Afrobeat at low volume. Amara looked up from the cake. Their eyes met. And Kang Jae-hyun, the Shadow King, sovereign of empires, the man whose silence made worlds tremble, felt something dislocate inside his chest. It was small. A hairline fracture. Barely noticeable. But it was the beginning of the end of everything he had built around his heart. "Welcome," she said, her voice carrying the same warmth as the room. "What can I get you?" He stood motionless for a beat too long. His dark eyes swept over her face. The eyes he'd studied in surveillance photographs were infinitely more arresting in person. They held depth. Kindness. A sadness she carried gracefully, the way a river carries stones without slowing. "Coffee," he said. "Black." She smiled. "Bold choice. Take a seat anywhere." He chose the table nearest the window, a strategic position back to the wall, sightlines to both exits. Old habits. When she brought the coffee he noticed her hands. Strong but elegant. Shea butter smooth. A small band-aid on her inner elbow, from the most recent donation. From saving his son's life. She didn't know. She had no idea the man sitting in her cafe owed her everything. "You're not from this neighborhood," she observed. "No. Business nearby?" Something like that. She studied him for a brief moment, not with suspicion but with the natural curiosity of someone who reads people well. Her gaze caught the tattoo at his collar but didn't linger. She'd been in Seoul long enough to know that not all ink told the same story. "Well," she said, "the coffee's strong and the puff-puff is fresh. If you need anything, I'm Amara." "I know," he said. Then, catching himself, the same slip his son had made, the sign. "Outside." She nodded and returned to the counter. Jaehyun sipped the coffee. It was perfect. He stayed for 47 minutes. He did not speak again. He did not need to. He watched her work, the way she greeted every customer by name, the way she adjusted the radio volume when an elderly patron sat near the speaker, the way she wiped the counter in the same circular motion every time, a ritual as precise as prayer. When he left, he placed a 100,000 won bill beneath the coffee cup. The coffee cost 3,000 won. Amara found the bill and stared at it. She looked at the door, then the window. The man was gone. The black sedan was gone. She tucked the bill into the register and told herself it was a mistake. But she remembered his eyes. Dark. Piercing. Carrying something vast and unsaid behind them, like an ocean viewed through a keyhole. She didn't know his name. She didn't know what he was. But she felt, with a certainty she couldn't rationalize, that she would see him again. 1 week later. He came back. Same table. Same coffee. Same silence. This time he ordered a meat pie. "My son recommended them," he said. Amara paused. "Your son?" "Small boy. Blue coat. Came in about 10 days ago." Recognition lit her face. "Minjun? That was your son?" "Yes." "He's wonderful," she said, and she meant it completely. "Very smart. Very honest. He told me my plantain pastry tasted like two countries becoming friends." Something shifted in Jaehyun's expression, a tectonic movement beneath stone. Not quite a smile. Not quite pain. Something between the two where fatherly pride meets fatherly terror. "He has good taste," Jaehyun said. "He's thin," Amara said carefully. "Is he well?" The question landed with surgical precision, though she didn't intend it as surgery. She was simply a person who noticed things, a skill born from years of paying attention to people who needed attention. Jaehyun's tattooed hand tightened around the coffee cup. The serpent on his wrist coiled. "He has a medical condition," he said. "Nothing more." Amara nodded. She did not press. She understood, instinctively, deeply, that some wounds are not yours to touch. "Then bring him back," she said. "I'll make him something special every time." "Why?" The question was genuine. In Jaehyun's world, everything had a price, a motive, a transaction underneath. Kindness without agenda was a foreign language. "Because he's a child," Amara said simply. "And every child deserves a place where they feel welcome." She went back to the counter. Jaehyun sat with the meat pie untouched. He was in trouble. He knew it with the same certainty he knew market shifts and power dynamics and the precise moment to strike or withdraw. This woman was not a strategy to be managed or a variable to be controlled. She was something his entire architecture of power had no framework for. She was kind. Not performatively kind. Not transactionally kind. Kind in the marrow. Kind the way water is wet, fundamentally, without effort, without choice. And that kindness, directed at his son, felt like the most dangerous force he had ever encountered. Because it made him want things he had sworn he would never want again. Over the next month, it became a pattern. Jaehyun visited the cafe twice a week. Always the same table. Always black coffee. Always a quiet exchange with Amara, never more than a few sentences, but each one carrying more weight than the last. He learned her rhythms. The way she hummed while kneading dough. The way she switched between Korean and English mid-sentence when distracted. The way she touched the small gold necklace at her throat, her mother's, when she was thinking about home. He brought Minjun 3 times. Each visit the boy grew more animated. He sat at the counter and watched Amara bake with the fascination of a scientist observing a miracle. He asked questions. Why does butter make things flaky? What's the difference between Nigerian and Korean cinnamon? Do you think bread has feelings? And Amara answered everyone with seriousness and warmth. On the 3rd visit, Minjun asked if he could help. Amara looked at Jaehyun. He nodded. She tied a miniature apron around the boy and taught him to roll chin-chin dough. Minjun's laughter filled the cafe like music. Jaehyun sat at his table, coffee growing cold, and watched his son, his fragile, brilliant, dying son, laugh with the unguarded joy of a child who has momentarily forgotten that his body is trying to destroy itself. The dragon on Jaehyun's neck moved as he swallowed hard. He turned away. But not before Amara caught the look on his face. It was grief. Pure, refined, unmistakable grief, the kind that lives permanently in the eyes of a parent who knows their child may not grow old. She didn't say anything. But that night, after closing, she stood in the empty cafe and pressed her hand against the counter where Minjun had been standing, and she cried. She didn't know why. She didn't know whose grief she was carrying. But she felt it like her own. 2 weeks later. His name was Daniel Choi. He was 34, Korean-American, a food journalist who wrote for a popular Seoul lifestyle magazine. He was handsome in a clean, approachable way, warm smile, wire-rimmed glasses, the kind of easy confidence that came from never having been truly afraid. He discovered Ao's Kitchen while researching an article on immigrant-owned small businesses in Seoul. He walked in on a Thursday afternoon, ordered one of everything on the menu, and spent 2 hours eating, taking notes, and watching Amara with openly admiring eyes. "This is extraordinary," he told her, holding up a half-eaten puff-puff. "You're blending West African and Korean flavors in ways I've never seen. Can I feature you in my column?" Amara blinked. "You want to write about my cafe?" "I want to write about you. Your story. Where you came from, how you ended up in Seoul, what drives your cooking. This is exactly the kind of story Seoul needs to hear." She hesitated. Publicity meant attention. Attention meant scrutiny. And some part of her, the part that had learned to survive by staying small and unnoticed, recoiled from it. But another part, the part that remembered her mother saying go far and build something that outlasts me, leaned forward. "Okay," she said. Daniel smiled like he'd won something valuable. He came back the next day. And the day after that. Each visit longer than the last. He was charming, genuine, and easy to talk to. He asked about Nigeria with real curiosity. He learned to pronounce chin-chin correctly. He brought her a book about Korean African culinary history that he'd had shipped from New York. On the 4th visit he said, "I know this is forward, but would you like to get dinner sometime? Not for the article. Just dinner." Amara opened her mouth to respond. The door chimed. Kang Jaehyun walked in. He was wearing a black turtleneck that accentuated the sharpness of his jaw and covered most of his neck tattoo, though the dragon's tail still crept above the fabric near his ear. His presence entered the room before he did, that particular density of power and silence that made the air itself rearrange. He saw Daniel immediately. Daniel's hand was resting on the counter near Amara's. Their bodies were angled toward each other, the geometry of attraction. Jaehyun's expression did not change. Not one muscle. But his eyes, those dark, calculating eyes, performed a full assessment of Daniel Choi in approximately 2 seconds. Height, build, posture, confidence level, threat classification. He filed the information in the same mental vault where he stored the names of enemies. Your usual? Amara asked him, stepping naturally away from Daniel to reach for a coffee cup. Yes. I'll bring it over. Jaehyun walked to his table. Saturday. Placed his tattooed hands flat on the surface. The tiger on his left forearm was partially visible beneath a rolled cuff. Daniel watched him go. Friend of yours? Daniel asked Amara quietly. Regular customer, she said. But her cheeks were warm. And she did not know why. Later that evening, Jaehyun sat in his study with a glass of whiskey he hadn't drunk and a fire he hadn't lit. Sung-ho stood before him. Daniel Choi, Jaehyun said. Food journalist. Korean American. Works for Seoul Metropolitan Magazine. Who is he to her? He's been visiting the cafe for 5 days. His interest appears to be both professional and personal. Personal? Yes, sir. Silence. Jaehyun rotated the whiskey glass between his tattooed fingers. The serpent on his right wrist coiled and uncoiled with the motion. And what are his intentions? He's asked her to dinner. Did she accept? She was interrupted. By you. More silence. Jaehyun set down the glass. I don't want him investigated, he said. Sung-ho's eyebrows rose. I don't want him followed. I don't want him pressured. I don't want him to disappear. Each statement was delivered with the precision of a man drawing a boundary for himself. She is not a possession. She is not an asset. She is a person who happens to keep my son alive, and she is free to have dinner with whoever she chooses. Understood, sir. Jaehyun picked up the glass again. Just make sure he's not connected to anyone who wants to harm my family. Sung-ho allowed himself a tiny, invisible smile. That will require a background check, sir. Then do a background check. Sung-ho left. Jaehyun drank the whiskey in one swallow. It burned. Not as much as the image of another man's hand near hers on that counter. The following week, 2 things happened simultaneously that would alter the trajectory of every life in this story. First, Minjun's condition worsened. During a routine blood panel, Dr. Yoon discovered that the intervals between hemolytic episodes were shortening. What had once been monthly crises were now occurring every 3 weeks. The boy's body was accelerating its own destruction. We're running out of time, Dr. Yoon told Jaehyun in the private consultation room, charts spread across the desk like maps of a failing country. The donor blood sustains him, but it's a bandage on a wound that keeps growing. We need a permanent solution, either a bone marrow transplant from a compatible donor or a gene therapy protocol that's still in experimental stages. The donor, Jaehyun said. Could she be a bone marrow match as well? Given the extraordinary blood compatibility? It's possible. Even probable. But we'd need to test her directly, and that means revealing everything. Yes. Jaehyun stood at the window looking down at the city. His reflection stared back. The dragon and the tiger and the storm clouds, a body mapped with symbols of power, containing a man who felt powerless. Not yet, he said. Second. Someone else discovered Amara. His name was Park Dong-soo. Formerly Jaehyun's chief financial officer. Currently a rival operator who had been expelled from the Kong organization 2 years ago for skimming profits and selling intelligence to a competing syndicate. Dong-soo had not forgotten. Had not forgiven. Had spent 2 years rebuilding in the shadows, assembling a coalition of disgruntled former associates, minor crime lords, and a corrupt government official or two. He wanted Kang Jae-hyun destroyed. And he had just learned, through a bribed hospital technician, that the Shadow King's only son was kept alive by a single anonymous blood donor. Find the donor, Dong-soo said to his second-in-command. If we control her, we control the boy. If we control the boy, we control Kang Jae-hyun. The hunt began. Meanwhile, Amara said yes to dinner with Daniel. They went to a small Korean restaurant in Itaewon. He ordered japchae. She ordered sundabujjigi. They talked for 3 hours. About food, about identity, about what it means to build a home in a country that isn't yours. Daniel was kind, attentive, genuine. He didn't press too hard or assume too much. He was the kind of man her mother would have approved of, stable, warm, uncomplicated. But when Amara lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, the face that drifted into her thoughts was not Daniel's. It was Jaehyun's. Those dark, guarded eyes. The tattoo peeking above his collar. The way he looked at his son, with a love so fierce it bordered on violence. The way he looked at her, with something unreadable and vast like staring into deep water. She turned over and pulled the blanket up. "Stop it," she whispered to herself. But her heart had already started keeping a separate account of him. Every word, every glance, every silence, and the balance was growing by the day. 3 weeks later, Daniel's article was published. The Heart of Seoul's Kitchen, How Nigerian Baker Amara Okafor is Bridging Worlds Through Food. It was beautiful, thoughtful, respectful. It captured her story, the sacrifice of leaving home, the struggle of building a business alone in a foreign city, the quiet revolution of a black woman claiming space in a Korean neighborhood through pastry and persistence. The article went viral. Within 48 hours, AO's Kitchen had a line out the door. Food bloggers descended. Instagram posts multiplied. Orders flooded in. Amara's phone rang constantly. A television producer called about a segment on a morning show. Soo-yeon, who had never seen more than 12 customers in a single afternoon, stood behind the register with the wide-eyed expression of someone watching a small boat navigate a tsunami. "Yooni," she whispered. "There are 53 people waiting." Amara looked at the line stretching past the laundromat and felt two things simultaneously, overwhelming gratitude and paralyzing terror. She had wanted this. She had dreamed of this. But she had dreamed of it as a slow bloom, not a wildfire. Across the city, Jaehyun saw the article. He read it 3 times. He looked at the photograph accompanying the piece, Amara in her cafe, apron dusted with flour, a gentle smile directed at someone off camera. The warmth in the image was palpable, even through a screen. He set down the phone and looked at the ceiling. "What are you doing?" he murmured. Not to her. To himself. Because he recognized what was happening. The visits. The coffee. The way he waited for her voice. The way his world, a world of steel and shadows and absolute control, rearranged itself around a woman who made pastry in a tiny corner cafe. He was falling. Slowly. Irreversibly. Against every survival instinct he possessed. And the most dangerous part was, he didn't want to stop. 2 days later, Minjun had another episode. This one came at school, a private academy where he attended classes between hospitalizations. He collapsed during recess. Teachers called the emergency number. The private medical team arrived in under 4 minutes. By the time Jaehyun reached the hospital, the transfusion was already underway. Amara's blood, drawn just 5 days earlier, flowed into his son's veins. Minjun stabilized. But slower this time. The recovery took hours instead of minutes. Dr. Yoon pulled Jaehyun aside. "The episodes are accelerating. His body is building resistance to the transfused blood. Within 6 months, possibly sooner, standard transfusions won't be enough." He paused. "We need to begin testing for bone marrow compatibility. And the most likely candidate is her." "Yes." Jaehyun closed his eyes. The dragon on his neck seemed to breathe. That evening, he drove to the cafe. It was after closing. The lights were off. But through the back window he could see a warm glow. Amara was still inside cleaning the way she always did in her precise circular motions. He didn't enter. He stood in the alley beside the building in the dark, in the rain that had begun to fall, and he made a decision. He would tell her. Not everything. Not yet. But enough. He would invite her into his world, carefully, gradually, and create a context in which she might choose to help his son willingly. Not through manipulation. Not through coercion. Through truth. Or as much truth as a man like him was capable of offering. The next morning, Amara arrived at the cafe to find a black envelope slid under the door. Inside was a single card, heavy cream stock, embossed with a subtle dragon watermark. The handwriting was precise and masculine. "Amara, my son speaks of you constantly. He asks if you would consider teaching him to bake. I would like to invite you to our home this Saturday for an afternoon. Minjun would be honored. So would I. A car will be arranged if you accept. Kang Jaehyun." At the bottom in smaller script, a phone number. Amara read the card 3 times. She touched the embossed dragon. She thought of Minjun's laugh. The way his small hands had rolled dough with such careful concentration. The way he had looked at her like she was something wonderful and safe. She thought of Jaehyun. The way he sat in silence. The way his eyes tracked her across the room with an intensity that should have been frightening but somehow wasn't. The grief. She picked up her phone and typed a message to the number on the card. "I'll be there." She pressed send before she could change her mind. Across the city, in the study of the Kang estate, Jaehyun's phone lit up on the desk. He read the 2 words. And for the second time in 6 years, something cracked inside the walls he had built. The first time had been the moment he learned his wife was dead. This time the crack let light in. Saturday. The black sedan wound through streets Amara didn't recognize. The city peeled away like layers of an onion, commercial districts, residential neighborhoods, then long roads lined with ancient trees that formed a canopy overhead, filtering the autumn light into gold and amber. The Kang estate materialized behind a wall of stone so high it seemed designed not to keep people out, but to keep a world contained. The gates opened. Amara's breath caught. The grounds were vast, traditional Korean architecture blended with modern design, all of it surrounded by meticulously maintained gardens, stone pathways, and a koi pond that reflected the October sky like a mirror. It was beautiful in a way that was almost aggressive, as if the estate itself was asserting dominance over the landscape. Minjun was waiting at the entrance. He was wearing a yellow sweater that made him look like a small sun. When he saw Amara step out of the car, he abandoned all pretense of composure and ran to her. "Amara Sasai, you came." She knelt and caught him in a hug that surprised them both. His body was light. Too light. She could feel his ribs through the sweater. The physical reality of his illness, which she had noted but never confronted, pressed against her chest as she held him. "Of course I came," she said. "We have baking to do." He grabbed her hand and pulled her toward the house. Inside, the kitchen was larger than her entire apartment. Marble countertops, professional ovens, a spice rack that looked like a small library. Every tool she could imagine and several she couldn't. But it felt sterile and used. A kitchen designed for display, not love. Amara changed that within minutes. She covered the pristine counter with flour. She let Minjun crack eggs, messily, joyfully, shells and all. She taught him the chin-chin recipe her mother had taught her, the exact ratio of sugar to flour, the way you knead until the dough becomes soft like a sleeping baby's cheek, the temperature of the oil measured not by thermometer but by the sound it makes when a test piece enters. "Listen," she said, dropping a tiny ball of dough into the hot oil. "Hear that sizzle? That's the oil saying I'm ready." Minjun listened with his entire body. "The oil is talking," he whispered, awed. "Everything talks," Amara said. "Dough, oil, ovens. The kitchen is full of conversations. You just have to learn the language." From the doorway, Jaehyun watched. He stood with his shoulder against the door frame, arms crossed, the tattoo on his right forearm visible where his sleeves were rolled. The tiger's eye stared outward from beneath his wrist. The storm clouds on his collarbone shifted as he breathed. He watched his son laugh. He watched Amara guide Minjun's small hands through the dough, patient and warm, adjusting his technique without criticism, praising his effort without exaggeration. He watched the flour dust settle on her dark skin like snow on warm earth. He watched his son look at her the way he had once looked at his mother, with absolute trust. With the specific adoration a child reserves for the person who makes the world feel safe. And he felt 2 things crash together inside him like tectonic plates. Gratitude, so enormous it had no container. And fear, because he was about to bring this woman into a world that destroys everything soft, everything kind, everything warm. Later that afternoon, they ate together. The 3 of them sat at the enormous dining table, surrounded by plates of chin-chin, puff-puff, and Minjun's first attempt at meat pies, lopsided, overcooked and, according to him, perfect. Minjun talked non-stop. About school. About the cartoon he was watching. About a dream he'd had where fish flew and birds swam. About how he wanted a puppy. About how hospitals smelled like sad clean. Amara listened to everything. Responded to everything. Laughed at his jokes and took his observations seriously with equal commitment. Jaehyun mostly watched. But at one point Minjun turned to him and said, "Appa, your coffee is getting cold." Amara looked at the cup. "You drink it black here too?" "Always." "No one drinks coffee black by choice," she said. "They drink it black because they've forgotten how to enjoy sweetness." The observation landed with uncomfortable precision. Jaehyun held her gaze. Maybe they need someone to remind them. The air between them changed. Something electric and fragile entered the space. a tension that had nothing to do with coffee and everything to do with two people standing at the edge of something neither was prepared to name. Minjun, oblivious, dunked a chin-chin in milk. "Can Amara come back next Saturday?" he asked. "That's up to her," Jaehyun said. Amara looked at the boy. At the father. At the vast, beautiful, empty house that felt less empty now than it had 3 hours ago. "I'd like that," she said. That night. After Amara left, Jaehyun carried Minjun to bed. The boy was exhausted, the kind of exhaustion that lives beneath the surface of illness, always waiting to pull a child under. "Appa," Minjun murmured, already half asleep. "Yes." "Amara's hands are warm." Jaehyun tucked the blanket around him. "Are they?" "When she held my hands to show me how to knead the dough. Her hands were really warm." Pause. "Like Yama's hands in the picture." The words hit Jaehyun like a fist to the sternum. He sat on the edge of the bed for a long time after Minjun fell asleep. His tattooed hand rested on the blanket beside his son's small form. The dragon on his neck and the serpent on his wrist and the tiger on his arm, all those symbols of power and violence and control, were rendered meaningless beside a sleeping child. He pressed his forehead against his clasped hands. And for the first time in years, Kang Jaehyun allowed himself to feel the full, devastating weight of what he wanted. Not just for his son to live, but for his son to be loved. And the woman who could do both, save him and love him, was the same woman. The same one. And she still didn't know. Over the next 6 weeks, Saturdays at the Kang estate became sacred. Amara arrived at noon. She and Minjun baked. They experimented, jollof rice arancini, kimchi puff puff, matcha chin chin. Some experiments succeeded brilliantly. Others failed spectacularly. Both outcomes produced laughter. Jaehyun was always present but rarely intrusive. He occupied the periphery, reading in the adjacent room, taking calls in his study, appearing at the kitchen doorway just often enough to remind Amara that she was being watched. Not with suspicion. With something she was increasingly unable to deny. Hunger. Not physical. Deeper. The hunger of a man who has been starving in plain sight. Their conversations grew longer. More personal. He told her about his business, the legitimate surface of it. Global investments. Real estate. Technology. He told her nothing about the underworld, but the tattoos told their own story, and Amara was too intelligent not to read between the lines. She told him about Nigeria. About her mother, Ao, who had raised 4 daughters alone after their father left, who had taught each of them to cook as an act of survival and love, who had died of breast cancer 3 years ago, whispering go far with her last breath. She would have liked Minjun, Amara said one evening, standing in the garden while the boy chased fireflies in the dusk. She would have liked you, Jaehyun said. Then quietly, everyone likes you. Not everyone. Name one person who doesn't. Amara thought. My landlord. The ghost of a smile crossed his face, the rarest expression in his repertoire, offered so infrequently that each occurrence felt like a private eclipse. I'll speak to your landlord, he said. Don't you dare. But she was smiling too. And in the golden light of that autumn evening, with Minjun's laughter ringing across the garden and fireflies painting the air with temporary stars, something settled between them. Not a confession. Not a declaration. A recognition. The recognition that they had become, against all logic and self-preservation, essential to each other. But the world does not pause for quiet moments. Night. A warehouse district in Incheon. Park Dong-soo sat behind a steel desk in a converted shipping container, reviewing the file his people had assembled. The donor had been identified. Amara Okafor. Nigerian. Cafe owner. Mapogu. Monthly blood donor. Single point of failure for Kang Minjun's survival. Dong-soo smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. It was the expression of a man who has found the unlocked door in a fortress. She's a nobody, said his second-in-command, a thick-necked man named Huang. No security. No connections. She walks to work alone. That's what makes her perfect, Dong-soo said. Kang Jaehyun has built an empire. An empire with one weakness, a 6-year-old boy. And that boy has one weakness, a woman who doesn't even know she matters. He closed the file. We don't need to hurt her. Not yet. We just need to control her. Make her unavailable for one donation cycle. To at most. The boy's condition will deteriorate. Kang will be forced to negotiate. And when he does, Dong-soo leaned back. He'll give me everything I want. What if he retaliates? He won't risk it. Not with his son's life in the balance. Dong-soo's eyes hardened. The Shadow King's greatest strength has always been his willingness to sacrifice anything. But the one thing he won't sacrifice is that child. And that makes him, for the first time in his life, controllable. Huang nodded. Begin surveillance, Dong-su said. Learn her schedule. Map her movements. And find a way to separate her from Kang's protection. The order was given. The clock began to tick. 2 weeks later. Amara sat in the familiar chair at the Hanul Medical Donor Center. Nurse Cho inserted the needle with practiced ease. The blood flowed, dark, rich, life-giving, into the collection bag. How are you feeling today? Nurse Cho asked. Tired, Amara admitted. The cafe has been busy since the article. Good busy but still busy. You need to take care of yourself too, you know. You can't pour from an empty cup. Amara smiled. My mother used to say that. As the donation progressed, Amara's mind wandered to Saturday. To Minjun's latest obsession, a plan to create the world's first Nigerian-Korean birthday cake for his 7th birthday, coming up in 3 weeks. It has to have layers, he had told her very seriously. Many layers. Because I am a complicated person. She had laughed so hard she'd cried. She was thinking about cake layers when a man sat down in the waiting area across from the donation room. He wore a gray jacket and read a newspaper. He looked ordinary. He was anything but. Huang, Dong-su's second-in-command, memorized the layout of the donor center, the position of cameras, the timing of the staff rotation, and the exact route Amara would take when she left. 20 minutes later, Amara walked out with a cotton ball on her arm and a juice box in her hand. Huang followed at a distance of 60 meters. He followed her all the way to the cafe. Then he disappeared into the city. That evening, Sung-ho's surveillance team flagged the anomaly within 2 hours. Unknown male. Followed the donor from the medical center to her workplace. Professional spacing. Deliberate route variation. This wasn't amateur. The report landed on Jae-hyun's desk at 9:47 p.m. He read it once. His jaw tightened. The dragon scales beneath his ear flexed. Identify him, he said. By midnight, facial recognition had produced a match. Wang Junsik. Former enforcer for the Kong organization. Current associate of Park Dong-su. The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Dong-su, Jae-hyun said the name like a man testing the edge of a blade. He knows about her. Sung-ho's face was grim. It appears so, sir. Jae-hyun stood. He walked to the window. Seoul glittered below, indifferent, beautiful, dangerous. Double the security detail on Amara. She now has 2 teams, visible and invisible. I want the visible team close enough to intervene in 3 seconds. I want the invisible team close enough to identify threats before they materialize. She'll notice, sir. 2 teams. She'll notice one person who seems to appear in her neighborhood more than usual. That's all. Jae-hyun turned from the window. His entire body was taut, the contained violence of a predator who has detected a threat to his territory. And Sung-ho. Sir. Find Dong-su. Find him before he moves. Because if anything happens to her, the tattoo on his neck seemed to pulse with his heartbeat. I will take apart everything he has ever built, every person he has ever relied on, every safe place he has ever known. And I will do it slowly. The promise was delivered with the quiet certainty of a natural law. Sung-ho believed every word. The following Saturday. The Kong estate. Minjun was having a good day. These were measured in small increments, energy levels, color in his cheeks, appetite, the brightness in his eyes. Today all indicators were positive. He bounced around the kitchen while Amara assembled the prototype of his birthday cake. 7 layers, he insisted. 1 for each year. 7 layers will take 7 hours, Amara said. Then we start now. Jae-hyun appeared in the doorway. He was dressed casually, a rarity. Black pullover that exposed the serpent tattoo winding down his left wrist. Dark jeans. No shoes. He looked less like a Mafia sovereign and more like an ordinary father, which made him somehow more devastating. Can I help? He asked. Both Amara and Minjun stared at him. You want to bake? Amara said. I want to try. Minjun whispered loudly. He can't even make ramen. I can hear you. I know. Amara tied an apron around Jae-hyun's waist. Her fingers brushed his hip. Both of them went still. The kitchen air thickened. You're on egg duty, she said, stepping back, her voice slightly unsteady. He cracked an egg. Shell fragments fell into the bowl. Like father, like son, Amara said. Minjun erupted in giggles. And Jae-hyun, the Shadow King, the sovereign of empires, stood in his own kitchen with egg on his tattooed fingers and an apron around his waist and something that felt terrifyingly close to happiness in his chest. For 30 minutes they were a family. No one said it. Everyone felt it. Later. Minjun fell asleep on the living room couch, dusted in flour, a smear of frosting on his cheek. Amara covered him with a blanket while Jaehyun stood nearby, watching her tuck the fabric around his son with the same care she used to fold dough. "You're good with him," Jaehyun said. "He makes it easy." "No. He doesn't. He's sick. He's complicated. He has nightmares and episodes and weeks where he can't leave the hospital. That's not easy. But you make it look like it is." Amara straightened. She looked at Jaehyun directly, really looked the way she sometimes did, seeing past the armor and the tattoos and the reputation to whatever lived underneath. "Tell me about his condition," she said. Not a question. A request. Quiet but firm. Jaehyun hesitated. Jaehyun. First time she'd used his name without the formality. "I care about him. Whatever it is, I want to understand." He told her. Not everything. But enough. Congenital hemolytic syndrome. The destruction of his own blood cells. Monthly transfusions. A single compatible donor. The accelerating episodes. The narrowing window. He did not tell her who the donor was. Amara listened without interruption. Her eyes glistened, but she did not cry. She absorbed the information the way she absorbed everything, completely, with her whole self. "Is there a cure?" she asked. "Possibly. Bone marrow transplant. But we'd need a compatible donor. Then find one. We're trying." The simplicity of her response, "Then find one," delivered without hesitation, without qualification, as if the most complex medical challenge in the world could be solved by sheer force of will and love, cracked something else inside him. Amara. Yes. He took a step closer. Then stopped. The distance between them was less than a meter, close enough to see the faint dusting of flour on her cheek, close enough to smell the warm sugar scent that always clung to her. "Why do you keep coming back?" he asked. "To this house. To us." She was quiet for a moment. "Because this house needs me," she said. "And I think, maybe I need it too." The silence that followed was not empty. It was full. Full of everything neither of them was ready to say. Jaehyun reached out and, with the gentleness of a man defusing a bomb, brushed a trace of flour from her cheek with his thumb. The serpent tattoo on his wrist slid past her jawline. Amara's breath caught. Neither moved. The sleeping child. The quiet house. The vast and dangerous world outside the walls. All of it held in suspension by a single touch. Then Amara stepped back. "I should go," she whispered. He lowered his hand. "The car is waiting," he said. She left. He stood in the doorway and watched the sedan disappear down the tree-lined drive. The dragon on his neck moved as he swallowed. "I'm in love with her," he said to the empty room. It was not a revelation. It was an admission. He had known for weeks. 9 days later. Minjun collapsed. Not at school this time. At home. In the garden. He had been feeding the koi when his body simply gave out, legs folding, consciousness flickering like a candle in wind. The medical team responded in 90 seconds. By the time Jaehyun reached the private hospital suite, his son was seizing on the bed. Monitors wailed. Dr. Yoon barked orders. Nurses moved with urgent precision. "Where is the blood?" Jaehyun's voice was ice. "Being transported now, sir." 15 minutes. He doesn't have 15 minutes. But the blood came. And it worked. Again. Minjun stabilized. Again. But slower. The recovery took 6 hours. Dr. Yoon's face, when he finally emerged from the monitoring room, carried the expression of a man delivering a death sentence. 3 months, he said. Maybe 4. After that, transfusions alone will not sustain him. We need the bone marrow option. And we need the donor to be tested. Jaehyun stood in the corridor. The fluorescent lights made the tattoos on his hands look like they were carved from shadow. 3 months. He could no longer afford to wait. He could no longer afford to protect the secret. He had to tell Amara everything. The next morning. He called her. "Can you come to the hospital? Minjun is asking for you." He heard the fear in her voice immediately. "Hospital? What happened?" "He had an episode. He's stable now." But Jaehyun paused, and for the first time his voice fractured. A hairline crack in the armor, but she heard it. "He wants to see you." "I'm coming." She was there in 40 minutes. Hanul Private Medical Center. The 37th floor. The elevator doors opened to a corridor Amara had never seen. Polished stone floors. Soft lighting. Armed security at every junction. Men who stepped aside when she approached, directed by invisible orders from above. She was escorted to a private suite. Minjun lay in the hospital bed, small and pale, connected to machines that beeped in rhythms she didn't understand. His eyes were closed. His breathing was shallow but steady. Amara sat beside him and took his hand. It was cold. She wrapped both of her warm hands around his and held on. "I'm here," she whispered. "I'm right here." Minjun's eyes fluttered open. He saw her and smiled, a fragile, triumphant smile, as if her presence was the proof he needed that the world was still worth staying in. "You came," he said. "Always." In the corridor outside, Jaehyun watched through the glass panel. He saw Amara holding his son's hand. He saw the warmth flowing from her to the boy like a current, visible, almost physical. He saw what Dr. Yoon saw, what Sung-ho saw, what everyone who witnessed this moment saw. She was already his son's mother. Not biologically, not legally, but in every way that mattered, in tenderness, in sacrifice, in the particular ferocity of love that says I will not let you disappear. She had already claimed the role. And she still didn't know she was keeping him alive. Jaehyun pressed his forehead against the glass. The storm clouds tattooed across his collarbone rose and fell with his breathing. He had to tell her. Today. 2 hours later. Minjun was sleeping peacefully. The transfused blood, Amara's blood, drawn 10 days ago, had done its work. Color was returning to his cheeks. His vitals were strong. Amara stood in the corridor, leaning against the wall, emotionally spent. Her eyes were red but dry. Jaehyun approached her. "There's something I need to tell you," he said. She looked at him. His expression was different from anything she had seen before. Stripped. Raw. The armor was not just cracked, it was removed. She was seeing the man beneath, and the man beneath was terrified. "About Minjun?" she asked. "About everything." He led her to the private consultation room. He sat across from her. The table between them felt like a continent. He opened his mouth, and his phone rang. "Sung-ho. Sir. We have a situation. Dong-su's people made a move. They attempted to access the donor center's records. We intercepted but handled it. For now. But sir, they know who she is. The donor. They have her name." Jaehyun's blood went cold. He looked at Amara sitting across from him. This woman who had given everything, who had saved his son's life 48 times, who had walked into his world with flour-dusted hands and a heart vast enough to hold a dying child, and he realized. The truth was no longer optional. The truth was now a matter of survival. "Amara." She waited. "My son's condition, the blood transfusions that keep him alive, the donor blood he receives every month." He paused. The dragon on his neck was fully visible. The serpent on his wrist coiled as his hand tightened. There is only one compatible donor in the world. One person whose blood matches his. One person who has been keeping him alive for 4 years without knowing it. Amara stared at him. The words assembled themselves in her mind slowly, then all at once. The medical center. The monthly donations. Nurse Cho's slip, one particular patient. The stipend that kept her cafe alive. The blood that left her body every 4 weeks and went, where? Here. To this floor. To this room. To this boy. Her hands began to tremble. "No," she whispered. Jaehyun's eyes did not leave hers. "The donor is you, Amara. It has always been you." The world tilted. Every wall she had built, every partition between her life and this impossible revelation, collapsed simultaneously. She stood up. The chair scraped against the floor with a sound like a wound. "You knew," she said. Her voice shook. "You knew this whole time. The cafe visits. The invitations. The Saturdays. You knew what I was to him. Not at first. But yes. I've known for months. And you didn't tell me? I was protecting." "Protecting who?" Her eyes blazed with a fury that came not from anger but from betrayal, the specific, devastating betrayal of a person who has been kept from a truth they deserved. "Yourself? Your secrets? Your control? My son." The words landed like stones in still water. Amara pressed her hand against her mouth. Tears she had been holding, for weeks, for years, for a lifetime of sacrifice and loneliness and the quiet devastation of being needed but never known, finally broke free. She turned and walked toward the corridor. "Amara? Don't." She pushed through the consultation room doors. And stopped. Because standing at the end of the corridor, flanked by 2 security guards who had not been there before, was Kang Jaehyun himself, having moved through the parallel hallway to cut her off. Their eyes locked. The fluorescent lights hummed. Machines beeped softly from Minjun's room behind her. Rain began to strike the hospital windows. She looked at him, the tattooed sovereign, the grieving father, the man who had watched her through cafe windows and brushed flour from her cheek and fallen in love with her while hiding the most important truth of her life. He looked at her, the woman who baked with love and gave blood without question and held his dying son's hand with warmth that could rival sunlight. Neither spoke. Everything changed. Silence. That was the loudest sound in the corridor. Not the rain hammering the hospital windows. Not the beeping of monitors from Minjun's room. Not the low hum of fluorescent lights casting pale blue shadows across the polished stone floor. Silence, heavy, electric, suffocating, stretched between Amara and Jaehyun like a wire pulled to its breaking point. She stood 10 feet from him. Her chest heaved. Tears streaked her face. Her hands, those warm, flower-dusted, life-giving hands, were clenched into fists at her sides. He stood motionless. The dragon tattoo on his neck pulsed with his heartbeat. His dark eyes held hers with an intensity that bordered on desperation, a look she had never seen from him before. The Shadow King did not beg. He did not plead. He did not stand in corridors with his armor stripped away, waiting for a woman to decide his fate. But here he was. Amara? How long? Her voice was raw, scraped from somewhere deep inside her. How long have you known it was me? He could have lied. He could have softened it. He could have wrapped the truth in layers of justification and strategic reasoning. He didn't. 3 months. The number hit her like a physical blow. 3 months. 12 Saturdays. 12 afternoons of baking with Minjun, of sitting in his garden, of standing close enough to feel the heat of his body, of slowly, stupidly, recklessly, falling for a man who had been lying to her face. 3 months, she repeated. You watched me come here every Saturday. You watched me hold your son's hand. You let me fall in. She stopped. The unfinished sentence hung in the air between them like a blade. Jaehyun took 1 step forward. Fall in what? Don't. Amara. You used me. The words came out broken, fractured along fault lines of pain and disbelief. You saw a woman giving blood in a clinic and you turned her into a, what? A resource? A strategy? A convenient way to keep your son alive while you decided when I deserved to know the truth. That is not what happened. Then tell me what happened. Her voice echoed down the corridor. A security guard shifted uncomfortably. Tell me why you invited me into your home. Why you let your son attach to me. Why you touched my face and looked at me like. She pressed both hands against her eyes. Like I mattered, she whispered. Jaehyun's jaw tightened so hard the dragon scales beneath his ear rippled. His tattooed knuckles whitened at his sides. You do matter, he said. His voice was low, controlled. But beneath the control, something was fracturing, the same steel and stone architecture that had held him together for 6 years, crumbling in real time. You matter more than you know. More than I can explain in a corridor. More than. Than what? Than your secrets? Than your control? She dropped her hands. Her eyes were red but fierce, the fierceness of a woman who has been hurt by someone she trusted, which is the deepest wound there is. You are a man who controls everything. People. Money. Information. And you controlled me too. You controlled what I knew about my own body. My own blood. My own, her voice cracked. My own connection to that child. She pointed toward Minjun's room. That boy loves me. And I love him. And the entire foundation of that love is built on a lie you chose to maintain because it served you. It served him, Jaehyun said. It served his safety. If you had known. What? I would have stopped donating? I would have run away. She stepped closer and her proximity did what her words could not. It broke through his composure. He could smell the sugar and shea butter. He could see the pulse in her throat. He could see every ounce of hurt she carried, and he knew, with the certainty of a man who has made a catastrophic mistake, that he had caused it. I have given blood every month for 4 years, she said, her voice now dangerously quiet. Every month. I never missed. Not when I was sick. Not when I was broke. Not when I was so homesick I could barely breathe. I did it because someone needed it. That was enough. That was always enough. She took a shuddering breath. You didn't have to buy my loyalty with lies. You just had to tell me the truth. Jaehyun opened his mouth. No words came. Because she was right. And the Shadow King, who had built empires on the precision of his words, had none. Amara turned. She walked past the security guards, past the sealed doors into the elevator. She pressed the lobby button with a trembling finger. The doors closed. Jaehyun stood alone in the corridor. Rain hammered the windows. And for the first time in his adult life, Kang Jaehyun did not know what to do next. 3 days of silence. Amara did not answer his calls. She did not respond to his messages. She went to the cafe at 5:40 a.m., baked, served customers, cleaned, went home. The rhythm of her life continued, because rhythm is what you hold on to when everything else is falling apart. But the rhythm was different now. She burned a batch of chin-chin on the first day, the first time she had burned anything in years. She forgot a customer's name on the second day. On the third day, Soo-yeon found her sitting in the back kitchen, staring at her hands, the same hands that had held Min-jun's small fingers, the same hands from which blood flowed every month into a bag that traveled to a floor she had never known existed, into a boy she had come to love without understanding why. "Yooni," Soo-yeon said gently. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine." She was not fine. She was disassembled. Every belief she had held about her life and soul, that she was a small person living a small life, making small contributions, had been overturned. She was not small. She was the single thread preventing a child's death. And the child's father, the man she had feelings for, feelings she had barely begun to acknowledge, had known this and kept it from her. The betrayal burned. But beneath the burn, something else smoldered. Understanding. Because Amara was not a person who stopped at anger. Anger was a room she passed through, not a room she lived in. And as she sat in her back kitchen with flour on her apron and tears she refused to shed, she thought about what she would have done in his position. A dying child. A single donor. The knowledge that revealing the truth could cause the donor to panic, to flee, to be targeted by enemies. Would she have told? Or would she have protected? The answer was not as simple as she wanted it to be. That same evening, Daniel Choi called. "I heard the cafe was mentioned in a food blogger's post again. Congratulations. Can I take you to celebrate? Dinner? Saturday?" Amara stared at the phone. Daniel was kind. Daniel was safe. Daniel was a world where things made sense, where food journalists wrote articles and bakers made pastry and no one's blood was keeping a mafia boss's son alive. "Saturday works," she said. She hung up and felt nothing. Across the city, Jae-hyun sat in his study with a glass of whiskey he had not touched. Sung-ho stood across the desk. "She's agreed to dinner with the journalist. Saturday evening. Restaurant in Gangnam." Jae-hyun said nothing. "Sir. I heard you." More silence. The serpent tattoo on Jae-hyun's wrist seemed to coil tighter as his hand gripped the armrest. "She has every right," Jae-hyun said. The words were precise but cost him something to produce. "She has every right to see whoever she wants. To go wherever she wants. She owes me nothing." "Understood. But increase her security detail. Dong-soo is still in play. She doesn't know she's in danger." Sung-ho hesitated. "If she discovers the security team, she'll discover a lot of things. Let her." Jae-hyun stood. He walked to the window. His reflection stared back. The tattoos, the sharp jaw, the eyes that held more pain than any boardroom or battlefield had ever produced. "I made a mistake. Not in protecting her. In thinking I could protect her without her consent. She deserved to choose. I took that from her." He pressed his tattooed hand flat against the cold glass. "I won't make that mistake again." The next morning, Min-jun noticed. Children notice everything adults try to hide. They lack the vocabulary but not the perception. And Min-jun, who had spent 6 years watching the world from hospital beds and car windows, had developed an observational capacity that bordered on preternatural. "Where's Amara?" he asked at breakfast. "She's busy," Jae-hyun said. "She's always busy on weekdays. She comes on Saturdays." Pause. "Is she coming this Saturday?" "I don't know." Min-jun put down his spoon. His dark eyes, those ancient, intelligent eyes that carried too much knowledge for a 6-year-old, locked onto his father. "You made her sad," he said. It was not a question. Jae-hyun set down his coffee. The tiger tattoo on his forearm flexed as his hand tightened around the cup handle. "Yes," he said. Because he had sworn years ago to never lie to his son. "I did." "Why?" "Because I kept something from her that she deserved to know." "A secret." "Yes." Min-jun thought about this with the seriousness of a philosopher. "When I keep secrets from you," he said, "you tell me that secrets between people who love each other always become hurt." "You said that." Jae-hyun closed his eyes. "I did say that." "Do you love Amara?" The question, direct, devastating, impossible to deflect, landed in the center of his chest. "Yes," he said. Min-jun nodded as if this confirmed something he had known all along. "Then fix it, Appa. Fix it before she goes away." Later that day, Min-jun did something extraordinary. While his father was in a meeting and his nurse was distracted, The boy took a piece of the Kong estate stationery, the same heavy cream stock with the dragon watermark, and wrote a letter. His handwriting was careful and slightly wobbly, the letters shaped with maximum effort. Dear Amara, my appa made a mistake. He is not good at feelings. He is good at being scary and wearing suits and knowing when the stock market will go down. But feelings are hard for him. I don't know what he did. But I know he is sorry because he has not eaten properly in 3 days and he stares at his phone a lot. Please don't go away. You are the warmest person I know. When you hold my hand, I forget that I am sick. When you laugh, the hospital doesn't smell like sad clean anymore. I don't have a mum. I know what that is because other kids have one. I have watched them at school. A mum is a person who makes you feel safe even when everything is scary. You make me feel safe. Please come back. Love, Minjun. P.S. I still want a 7-layer birthday cake. He sealed the letter in an envelope. He wrote, Amara, on the front in capital letters. He gave it to the household driver with specific instructions. Take this to Ao's kitchen. Give it to the lady with the warm hands. Don't tell Appa. The driver, who had worked for the Kong family for 15 years and had never disobeyed a direct order from Jae-hyun, looked at the 6-year-old boy and saw something in those eyes that made him understand the order came from a higher authority than the Shadow King. He delivered the letter. Ao's kitchen. 4 p.m. Amara was closing up when the driver appeared. He handed her the envelope without a word and left. She opened it at the counter. She read it once. Then again. Then she sat down on the floor behind the counter, right there on the tile between the flour bags and the mixing bowls, and wept. Not the quiet tears of the past 3 days. These were the deep, trembling, body-shaking sobs of a woman whose heart had been trying to tell her something her mind refused to accept. That she loved this boy. That she was supposed to love this boy. That some connections are not chosen but given, woven into the fabric of existence by hands wiser than ours, and fighting them is like fighting gravity. She pressed the letter against her chest. You make me feel safe. A child she had met by accident. Whose blood she had been sustaining without knowledge. Whose father she had been falling for despite every rational objection. This was not coincidence. This was not strategy. This was something else entirely. That evening, she texted Jae-hyun. 1 line. Your son wrote me a letter. His response came in 12 seconds. He didn't tell me. Her reply. He said you stare at your phone a lot. Pause. Then. He's observant. Another pause. Longer. Then Amara typed what she had been carrying for 3 days, the words that lived beneath the anger, beneath the betrayal, beneath the fear. I need time. But I'm not going away. Across the city, Jae-hyun read the message in his study. He set down the phone. He pressed both tattooed hands against his face. And he breathed. Saturday evening. Gangnam. The restaurant was elegant. Candlelight. White tablecloths. A jazz trio playing standards in the corner. Daniel had chosen well, the kind of place designed for conversation and connection for 2 people to lean toward each other across small distances. Amara wore a simple black dress. Gold earrings. Her mother's necklace. She had applied makeup for the first time in weeks, and the woman who looked back at her from the mirror had seemed like a stranger, beautiful, composed, and profoundly sad. Daniel was already seated when she arrived. He stood, pulled out her chair, smiled with genuine warmth. You look amazing, he said. Thank you. They ordered. They talked. Daniel told her about his latest article, a piece on fermentation techniques in traditional Korean cooking. He was passionate, articulate, and entirely focused on her. But Amara's mind kept drifting. To a hospital corridor. To a child's letter. To tattooed hands gripping a coffee cup. You're somewhere else, Daniel said gently halfway through the main course. Amara looked at him. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Just tell me where you are. She wanted to. She wanted to tell him everything. The blood, the boy, the father, the impossible web of connection and deception that had become her life. But none of it was hers to share. The secrets belonged to a child whose survival depended on them. I'm dealing with something complicated, she said. Personal. Daniel nodded. He reached across the table and placed his hand over hers. I like you, Amara. A lot. And I'm not going anywhere. Whatever you're dealing with, I'm here. It was the perfect thing to say. Kind. Patient. Supportive. And it confirmed, with painful clarity, what Amara already knew. Daniel was the right man. He just wasn't her man. Because her heart, that stubborn, irrational, magnificent organ, had already made its choice. It had chosen the dangerous one. The complicated one. The one with dragon tattoos and grief-stricken eyes and a dying son who wrote letters with wobbly handwriting. She squeezed Daniel's hand. "You are a good man," she said. "A truly good man." The emphasis on the word good told him everything. His smile dimmed, not with anger, but with the quiet resignation of a man who understands he has arrived second. "It's the regular customer, isn't it?" he said. Amara said nothing, which said everything. Daniel withdrew his hand slowly. He picked up his wine glass, took a sip, set it down. "He'd better deserve you," he said. "I don't know if he does." "Then make sure he earns it." They finished dinner as friends. He walked her to a taxi. He kissed her cheek, a goodbye, not a beginning. She watched him disappear into the Gangnam night and felt the particular sadness of closing a door that led somewhere safe. But safety had never been her destiny. 4 days later. 11:47 p.m. Amara was walking home from the cafe. She had stayed late. A catering order for a local university event required 300 pastries, and she and Suyun had worked until their arms ached. Suyun had left at 10. Amara finished packing the last boxes alone, locked the cafe and began the 14-block walk to her apartment. The streets of Mapogu were quiet. A light rain fell. Streetlights cast amber pools on wet pavement. She did not notice the van. It was white, unmarked, parked in an alley between a convenience store and a shuttered barber shop. Its engine was running. Its headlights were off. She did not notice the two men who stepped out of the shadows. She did not hear their footsteps until they were close. Too close. Amara Okafor? She turned. Two men. Both Korean. Both large. Both wearing expressions that carried no warmth, no curiosity, no humanity. Professional. Mechanical. Dangerous. "Who are you?" she asked. "Come with us, please." Quietly. "I'm not going anywhere with." One of them grabbed her arm. The touch was electric, not with connection but with terror. Amara's survival instincts, honed by years of navigating Lagos streets and Seoul nights, fired simultaneously. She screamed. The sound tore through the quiet neighborhood like a siren. The second man clamped a hand over her mouth. She bit him. He swore. She broke free and ran, 3 steps for steps, before the first man caught her jacket and yanked her backward. Then a sound split the night. Not a gunshot. Something lower. Harder. A body hitting concrete. The man holding her jacket crumpled. A figure emerged from the darkness with the speed and precision of a weapon. Black clothes. Earpiece. Combat stance. One of Jaehyun's invisible security team. A man who had been stationed within 30 meters of Amara every night for the past 3 weeks. The second attacker turned, drew a knife. 2 more of Jaehyun's men materialized from the shadows. The knife was disarmed. The attacker was on the ground in under 4 seconds. The entire encounter lasted less than 90 seconds. Amara stood on the wet sidewalk, breathing hard, her jacket torn, her hands shaking. She looked at the 3 men in black who now surrounded her in a protective triangle. "Who?" she gasped. "Who are you?" The lead operative, a woman, Amara now realized, with short hair and a calm, professional demeanor, spoke into her earpiece. "Package is secure. 2 hostiles neutralized." Notifying shadow. Then she turned to Amara. "Ms. Okafor, please come with us. Mr. Kong will explain." Amara's legs nearly buckled. Mr. Kong. Of course. Even when he wasn't there, he was there. Even when she was furious with him, he was protecting her. Even when she tried to walk away, his shadow followed, not to control but to guard. She got into the black SUV that appeared within minutes. And as it raced through the rain-slicked streets toward the Kong estate, Amara pressed her forehead against the cold window and whispered, "What have I walked into?" The Kong estate. 12:34 a.m. Jaehyun was waiting at the front entrance. He was not wearing a suit. He wore a black t-shirt, dark pants, as if he had been preparing for sleep when the call came. The t-shirt exposed the full canvas of his upper arms and neck, the dragon roaring across his shoulder, the storm cloud sweeping his collarbone, the serpent coiling down his left arm, the tiger's eye blazing near his right bicep. Under the porch lights, the tattoos seemed alive, a map of every battle, every loss, every kingdom built and defended. He said nothing when Amara stepped out of the SUV. He looked at her torn jacket, at her trembling hands, at the fear she was fighting to contain, and something changed in his face. Not anger. Something beyond anger. Something older and more primal, the expression of a predator whose territory has been violated, whose protected one has been touched. His dark eyes went flat. His jaw set into a line that could cut glass. The dragon on his neck flexed as every muscle in his body locked. "Are you hurt?" 2 words. delivered with such contained ferocity that the security operative beside Amara involuntarily stepped back. "I'm fine," Amara said. Her voice shook despite her best efforts. "They grabbed me, but your people." "Are you hurt?" he repeated. Because he needed to hear it again. Because once was not enough. "No. I'm not hurt." He exhaled. A long, slow breath that carried the weight of everything he would have done if the answer had been different. Then he turned to Sung-ho, who had appeared from inside the house. "The two men. Who sent them?" "Dong-soo." "Confirmed. Both are former associates of Hwang Jun-sik." "And Dong-soo? Still hidden." "We're tracing." Jaehyun's tattooed hands clenched at his sides. The peony flowers on his knuckles, those symbols of hidden emotional wounds, crumpled into fists. "Find him," Jaehyun said. "Before sunrise." Sung-ho left without another word. Inside, Amara sat in the living room of the Kang estate. A blanket had been placed around her shoulders. A cup of tea sat untouched on the table before her. Her hands had stopped shaking, but the aftershock was settling in, the delayed processing of a body that has narrowly escaped harm. Jaehyun sat across from her. He told her everything. Not the sanitized version. Not the strategic summary. Everything. Park Dong-soo. The betrayal. The expelled lieutenant seeking revenge. The discovery that Minjun's survival depended on a single donor. The plan to control Amara, to use her as leverage against the Shadow King. "They weren't going to hurt you," Jaehyun said. "Not immediately. They were going to take you. Hide you. Prevent you from donating." And when Minjun's next episode came, he stopped. Amara finished the sentence herself. "He would die." "Yes." She stared at her hands. The hands that kneaded dough. The hands that held Minjun's small fingers. The hands from which blood was drawn every month. Blood that was now, apparently, the most valuable substance in the Korean underworld. "This is why you didn't tell me," she said softly. "Yes. This is why you had me followed." "Protected," he corrected gently. "Not followed. Protected. Is there a difference?" "To me, yes." She looked at him. Really looked. Past the tattoos and the power and the terrifying stillness. Past the reputation and the empire and the walls he had built so high they blocked out the sun. She saw a father. A desperate, grieving, imperfect father who had done everything wrong in pursuit of the only thing that mattered, his son's life. "You should have told me from the beginning," she said. "From the very first day you sat in my cafe and ordered black coffee. You should have walked in and said, 'My name is Kang Jae-hyun. My son is dying. Your blood is the only thing keeping him alive. Will you help us?' And if I had? I would have said yes." Her voice broke on the last word. "I would have said yes without hesitation. Because that's who I am. That's who I've always been. And the fact that you didn't trust me with that, the fact that you assumed I would need to be managed instead of asked, that's what hurts." The silence that followed was devastating. Jaehyun leaned forward. His elbows rested on his knees. His tattooed hands hung between them. He looked, for the first time since she had known him, small. "You're right," he said. "About everything. I managed you when I should have trusted you. I built a strategy when I should have built a bridge. He stopped. Started again. "I come from a world where trust gets people killed. Where vulnerability is a liability. Where the only way to survive is to control every variable." He looked at her. "You are not a variable, Amara. You are the most important person in my son's life." And, the words seemed to cost him everything he had. "In mine." Amara's eyes filled with tears. She was too exhausted to fight. "I need to know something," she said. "And I need you to answer honestly. Anything. If my blood didn't match Minjun's, if I was just a woman who ran a cafe and had nothing your son needed, would you still be sitting here?" The question was a blade. Jaehyun held her gaze with the absolute stillness of a man who understands that his next words will determine everything. "Yes," he said. "Because I didn't fall in love with your blood type. I fell in love with the woman who hums while she needs dough. Who gives free chin-chin to children she's never met. Who names her cafe after her mother. Who carries loneliness like a suitcase she refuses to put down because she's afraid that if she stops moving she'll realize how heavy it is." He paused. "I fell in love with you, Amara. Not what you can do for my son. You." The words hung in the air like a held breath. Amara did not respond. She set down the tea. She pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders. And she said, "I need to sleep." He nodded. He showed her to a guest room, the one closest to Minjun's room, which she understood was intentional. He stopped at the doorway. "Good night, Amara." "Good night, Jaehyun." She closed the door. He stood in the hallway for several minutes. Then he went to his study, poured a whiskey he would not drink, and stared at the fire until dawn. 6:17 a.m. Amara woke to the sound of small footsteps. She opened her eyes. Minjun stood in the doorway of the guest room, wearing pajamas patterned with tiny rockets, clutching a stuffed bear. "You're here," he whispered as if confirming a miracle. "I'm here." He ran to the bed and climbed in beside her without asking permission, the unquestioning intimacy of a child who has decided that a person belongs to him. He tucked himself under her arm. His small body was warm but fragile. She could feel the faint, irregular rhythm of his heartbeat against her side. "Are you and Appa fighting?" he asked. "We're figuring things out." "Is that different from fighting?" "A little." He considered this. "When I fight with my friend Taewoo, we stop talking for a while. Then one of us shares a snack and it's okay again." He looked up at her. "Do you want me to bring you a snack?" Amara pressed her lips against the top of his head to hide the tears. "That would be nice," she murmured. He scrambled off the bed and disappeared. Minutes later he returned with a plate of misshapen cookies, clearly from his own baking attempts, and a juice box. "These are terrible," he announced proudly. "I made them myself." Amara ate every one. Later that morning, she found Jae-hyun in the kitchen. He was making coffee, or attempting to. The machine appeared to be winning the battle. "The button on the left," she said from the doorway. He pressed it. Coffee flowed. He turned to her with an expression of such weary gratitude that she almost smiled. "Almost. We need to talk about the bone marrow," she said. His eyes sharpened. "You know about that? You told me last night that transfusions won't be enough forever. That Minjun needs a permanent solution. That the most likely compatible donor," she pointed at herself, "is me." "Amara, I would never ask you to." "You're not asking. I'm offering." She held up her hand to stop his protest. "Let me be clear. I'm not doing this for you. I'm not doing this because of guilt or obligation or because armed men tried to grab me in the street. I'm doing this because that boy," she gestured toward the hallway where Minjun's off-key singing could be heard from the playroom, "called me the warmest person he knows. And I will not let him die." Jae-hyun stared at her. The dragon. The tiger. The serpent. The storm clouds. Every symbol of power and violence inked into his skin, rendered meaningless beside the quiet authority of a woman who had just decided to save his child. "You would do that," he said. "Not a question. I've been doing it for 4 years. I just didn't know it." She met his eyes. "Now I know. And I'm choosing it." He set down the coffee cup. He walked toward her. He stopped close, not touching, not crowding, but close enough that she could see the tiny peony petals inked at the edge of his collarbone, the ones that symbolized hidden emotional wounds. "Thank you," he said. 2 words. But the way he said them, fractured, reverent, dismantled, they carried more weight than any declaration of love. "Don't thank me yet," she said. "I still haven't forgiven you." "I know. But I'm here." "I know that too." Pause. "Your coffee is burning," she said. He turned. The machine was, indeed, producing something that looked more like tar than coffee. Behind his back, Amara allowed herself a small smile. The first real one in days. 3 days later. Hanul Private Medical Center. The bone marrow compatibility test was extensive. Blood draws. Tissue typing. HLA matching. Genetic sequencing. Amara spent 5 hours in the medical wing, the same building she had visited monthly for years, but now on floors she'd never accessed, surrounded by doctors whose deference told her that whoever was paying for this had limitless resources. Dr. Yoon supervised personally. "The preliminary results will take 48 hours, he told her. "But I want to be transparent with you, Ms. Okafor. Given your extraordinary blood compatibility, the probability of a bone marrow match is extremely high. And if it's a match, what does the procedure involve?" He explained. "The harvest process. The recovery time. The risks small but real. The impact on her body." Amara listened with the same focus she brought to everything, complete, unwavering, practical. "How soon can we do it?" she asked. Dr. Yoon blinked. "Most donors take weeks to decide. Minjun doesn't have weeks. You told his father 3 months. That was almost a month ago. So tell me how soon." Dr. Yoon looked at this woman, this extraordinary, stubborn, impossibly brave woman, and understood why the Shadow King had fallen in love with her. "If the results confirm compatibility, we could schedule the procedure within 2 weeks. Then let's hope the results are good." Meanwhile, Sung-ho found Park Dong-soo. The former lieutenant had been hiding in a rented property in Busan, coordinating his operation through encrypted channels and disposable phones. Jae-hyun's network, spanning police, intelligence agencies and his own extensive underworld contacts, closed around Dong-soo like a net. The confrontation happened at 3 a.m. in a Busan warehouse. Jae-hyun did not attend personally. He sent Sung-ho with 12 men and a very specific message. Sung-ho delivered it. Mr. Kang wants you to know 3 things. First, your 2 operatives have been arrested. They will cooperate with authorities. Second, every financial asset, property, and associate connected to your operation has been identified and will be dismantled within 72 hours. Third, Sung-ho placed a photograph on the table. It showed Dong-soo's elderly mother tending a garden at her home in Daegu. She was smiling. She was healthy. She was unaware she was being photographed. Mr. Kang wants you to know that he has no interest in your family. Unlike you who targeted his. Sung-ho's voice was steel. But he wants you to understand what it feels like to know that someone you love could be reached at any time. To know that the only thing protecting them is the restraint of a man who has every reason to exercise none. Dong-soo's face went white. This is your final warning, Sung-ho said. Leave Korea. Do not return. Do not contact anyone associated with the Kang family. Do not even think the name Kang Jae-hyun. Because the next time Mr. Kang will not send a message. He will deliver one personally. Sung-ho stood, adjusted his cuffs. And you do not want that. Dong-soo left the country within 24 hours. The threat was neutralized. But the damage, the near abduction of Amara, the exposure of Minjun's vulnerability, had left scars that would take longer to heal. 48 hours later, Dr. Yoon called Jae-hyun at 7:15 a.m. It's a match. Perfect compatibility. The best I've ever seen. Jae-hyun closed his eyes. The relief was so enormous, so total, that it temporarily dismantled every other emotion. The fear, the guilt, the longing, the grief. For one pure moment, there was nothing but the knowledge that his son could be saved. When can we proceed? Ms. Okafor has already been informed. She wants to do it as soon as possible. Jae-hyun paused. She's already agreed? She agreed before the results came in, sir. She told me, and I quote, I didn't wait for results to decide. I decided when I held his hand in that hospital bed. Jae-hyun sat down. The dragon on his neck. The serpent on his wrist. The tiger on his arm. Every symbol of strength he had ever worn, all of them inadequate to describe what he felt in that moment. This woman. This impossible, magnificent, terrifying woman. That afternoon. The Kang estate. Amara came to tell Minjun. She sat on the floor of his playroom, surrounded by Lego sets and picture books and the stuffed bear he carried everywhere, and she told him, in terms a 6-year-old could understand, what was going to happen. You know how your body sometimes gets tired and needs help from the special blood? Minjun nodded. Well, the doctors found a way to make your body stronger so it doesn't need help anymore. But to do that, they need something from me. What? A little piece of the inside of my bones. It's called marrow. They'll take some from me and give it to you, and it will teach your body how to be strong on its own. Minjun's eyes widened. Does it hurt? A little. But I'm very brave. I know you are. He paused, processing with that remarkable 6-year-old gravity. Will it really make me better? Like really better? Like not going to the hospital all the time better? That's what the doctors think. And then I can run? And play outside? And have a puppy? Yes. All of those things. Minjun was quiet for a moment. Then he climbed into her lap, something he did now without hesitation, with the absolute trust of a child who has claimed his person, and wrapped his small arms around her neck. Thank you, he whispered. Thank you for sharing your bones with me. Amara held him. She held him the way her mother had held her, tightly, fiercely, with the specific grip of someone who knows that love is not a feeling but an action, not a word but a sacrifice. She held him and she cried and she did not let go. In the doorway, Jae-hyun watched. He leaned against the frame, one hand gripping the wood, the tattoo on his wrist dark against the pale doorframe. His expression was unguarded, stripped of every defense, every wall, every layer of armor he had worn for 6 years. He was just a man. A man watching the woman he loved hold the child they both refused to lose. His vision blurred. He wiped his eyes with the back of his tattooed hand, the peony flowers smeared by a tear, and turned away before anyone could see. But Amara saw, and something final shifted inside her. The last wall fell. The night before the procedure. Rain came to Seoul like a warning. Not gentle rain. The kind of rain that arrived with wind and thunder and the feeling that the sky itself was being torn apart. The kind of rain that made the world feel temporary. Amara stood on the covered veranda of the Kong estate. She had been staying in the guest room for safety since the attempted abduction, and watched the storm paint the garden in silver and shadow. She was afraid. Not of the procedure. Dr. Yoon had explained it thoroughly. The risks were minimal. The recovery would take days, not weeks. The marrow would regenerate. She was afraid of what came after. After the procedure, Minjun would begin the recovery process. If the transplant succeeded, and Dr. Yoon was cautiously optimistic, the boy would gradually become healthy, strong, independent. He would no longer need monthly transfusions. He would no longer need her blood. He would no longer need her. And then what? What was she to this family without the biological miracle that connected her to them? What was she to Jae-hyun without the debt of gratitude that had drawn him to her cafe? What was she in this world of glass towers and underground empires and tattooed kings? A pastry chef from Lagos. Nothing more. Footsteps behind her. Jae-hyun appeared on the veranda. He stood beside her, close but not touching, both of them facing the storm. "You should be sleeping," he said. "So should you." "I don't sleep." "I know." Lightning fractured the sky. In the flash, his tattoos illuminated, the dragon, the serpent, the storm clouds across his collarbone, and for a moment he looked like something elemental. Not a man. A force. "I'm scared," she said. He turned to her. "Of the procedure? Of after?" He waited. "When Minjun doesn't need my blood anymore," she said, her voice barely audible above the rain, "what am I to you? What am I to him? The whole reason I'm standing in this house, the whole reason any of this exists, is because of a biological accident. My blood type. A genetic lottery. Take that away and I'm just." "Don't." The word was sharp. Definitive. He turned to face her fully, and the force of his attention was like standing in front of a furnace. "Don't reduce yourself to biology," he said. "Don't reduce what you are to what you can give. You are not a donor. You are not a blood type. You are not a medical file. You are—" He stopped. His hands were shaking. Kang Jae-hyun's hands were shaking. The serpent on his wrist trembled. "You are the reason my son smiles. You are the reason this house has warmth. You are the reason I—" His voice broke. He whose voice had toppled empires, whose whisper had ended wars, whose silence had governed kingdoms. His voice broke on the syllable that mattered most. "You are the reason I remember what it feels like to be human." Thunder rolled. Rain hammered the garden. And Amara closed the distance between them. She didn't think. She didn't calculate. She didn't weigh the consequences or the complications or the thousand reasons this was impossible. She placed both hands on his chest, palms flat against the storm cloud tattoo, feeling his heartbeat hammer beneath her fingers, and she looked up into those dark, guarded, devastated eyes. "Then don't let me go," she said. He reached for her. His tattooed hands, those hands that had gripped hospital railings and clenched in boardrooms and threatened empires, cupped her face with a gentleness so profound it was almost violent. The serpent on his wrist traced her jawline. The peony flowers on his knuckles pressed against her cheeks. He kissed her. Not gently. Not tentatively. He kissed her with the accumulated force of months of restraint, a kiss that tasted like rain and whiskey and the specific desperation of a man who has been starving in a room full of food he believed he wasn't allowed to touch. She kissed him back. With everything. With the loneliness and the sacrifice and the years of carrying burdens alone. With the flour dust and the shea butter and the mother's necklace pressed between their chests. With the full, devastating force of a woman who has finally stopped fighting the gravity pulling her toward someone she was always meant to find. The rain poured. The storm clouds on his collarbone met the warmth of her palms. The dragon on his neck breathed beneath her fingers. The kiss deepened. Then slowly, reluctantly, they separated. Foreheads touching. Breathing hard. Rain soaking the edges of the veranda around them. "Stay," he whispered. "I'm staying. Not tonight. Forever." She pulled back far enough to look at him. His face was raw. Open. The most dangerous man in Korea, stripped to nothing, asking a pastry chef from Lagos to stay with him forever. "Ask me again after the procedure," she said. "Ask me when your son is healthy and you're sure this isn't gratitude." "It's not gratitude." "Then it won't change in 2 weeks." He almost smiled. "You're impossible. I'm practical." "Same thing." She took his hand, his tattooed, trembling hand, and led him inside. They parted at the hallway. She went to her room. He went to his study. Both doors closed. Neither slept. but neither was alone anymore. And that made all the difference. Hanul Private Medical Center. 7 a.m. The procedure room was sterile and bright. Amara lay on the surgical bed, gowned and prepped. And 4-line fed a mild sedative into her arm. Dr. Yoon and his team moved around her with quiet efficiency. Minjun had been brought to see her before the anesthesia began. He stood beside the bed in his hospital gown, a matching patient here for the transplant preparation, and held her hand with both of his. "Does it hurt yet?" he asked. "Not yet. When it does, think about my birthday cake. 7 layers. That should keep you busy." She laughed. "Even here. Even now. This child could make her laugh." "I'll think about it," she promised. He squeezed her hand. Then, with the startling emotional intelligence he had inherited from a mother he never knew. "Thank you for choosing me, Amara." She blinked. "Choosing you? Appa told me you volunteered. That nobody made you. That you chose to share your bones with me because you wanted to." His eyes, those ancient luminous eyes, filled with something too complex for a 6-year-old and yet perfectly natural. "My Yama chose to give me life and she went to heaven. You're choosing to give me more life. That means I have 2 people who loved me enough to give me part of themselves." Amara could not speak. Dr. Yoon could not speak. A nurse in the corner turned away to compose herself. The only sound was the steady beep of the heart monitor and the quiet breathing of a boy who understood sacrifice better than most adults ever would. "I'll see you on the other side," Minjun said, echoing a phrase he had clearly learned from a movie. Then he kissed her hand and was led away to his own preparation room. Amara lay back on the bed. The sedative began its work. The last thing she saw before her eyes closed was Jaehyun's face in the observation window above the procedure room. He was looking down at her with an expression she could now identify, not gratitude, not obsession, not strategy. Love. Vast, terrified, unconditional love. She smiled. Then the world went soft and dark and warm. The procedure took 4 hours. Dr. Yoon extracted the marrow with practiced precision. The cells were processed, purified, and prepared for transplant into Minjun, who had already undergone the conditioning regimen to prepare his body. Jaehyun did not leave the observation area. He stood for 4 hours, motionless, watchful, his tattooed hands gripping the railing in front of the glass. The dragon on his neck. The serpent on his wrist. The tiger on his arm. Every mark of power he wore, rendered into what they truly were, not symbols of dominance, but totems of a man willing to stand guard over the 2 people who mattered most. When Dr. Yoon emerged and said, "Both procedures were successful. The initial signs are excellent," Jaehyun's grip on the railing loosened. He nodded once. Then he went to see his son. Then he went to see Amara. She was awake. Groggy. Sore. But awake. "How do you feel?" he asked, sitting beside her bed. "Like someone took a piece of my bones." "Someone did." "I know. I was making a joke." "Ah." Pause. "How's Minjun?" "Sleeping. The transplant is in process. Dr. Yoon says the initial acceptance rate is extremely promising." She closed her eyes and exhaled, a long, shuddering release of tension that had been building for weeks. "Then it was worth it," she said. Jaehyun reached out and took her hand. His tattooed fingers intertwined with hers, the serpent and the peony flowers pressed against her warm brown skin. "You are worth it," he said. "Everything about you. Everything you've done. Everything you are." She squeezed his hand. "Ask me again," she whispered. "Ask you what?" "What you asked me on the veranda." His heart stopped. Restarted. "Stay," he said. "Not tonight. Forever." Her eyes opened. "Warm. Clear. Certain. Yes." Over the next 3 weeks, Minjun's body accepted the marrow transplant with a compatibility that Dr. Yoon described as medically unprecedented. The engraftment process, where the donated cells begin producing new healthy blood cells, progressed faster than any model predicted. Within 10 days, Minjun's blood counts began to stabilize. Within 2 weeks, his hemolytic markers dropped to levels Dr. Yoon had never seen in a CHS7 patient. "It's working," the doctor said to Jaehyun, and for the first time in their 6-year professional relationship, Dr. Yoon smiled. "It's genuinely working." Minjun felt it. Not in the numbers or the charts, in his body. Energy he had never possessed began to fill him like water rising in a well. Colors seemed brighter. Food tasted better. He could walk the hospital corridors without fatigue. He could laugh without coughing. On the 15th day he asked to go outside. Jaehyun took him to the estate garden. Minjun stood on the stone pathway, looked up at the autumn sky and spread his arms wide, as if trying to embrace the entire world. I feel different, he said. Good different? Jaehyun asked, kneeling beside him. Alive different. The boy looked at his father with those luminous eyes. Is this what healthy feels like? Jaehyun pulled his son against his chest. The dragon on his neck pressed against the boy's small cheek. The tattooed hand that had gripped hospital railings and threatened empires and killed possibilities, that hand now simply held a child. Yes, he said. This is what healthy feels like. Meanwhile, Amara healed quickly. Her body, resilient, strong, accustomed to the daily physical demands of a bakery, recovered from the marrow harvest within days. She returned to Ao's kitchen within a week, though she found something unexpected waiting for her. The cafe had been renovated. Not dramatically. Not in a way that erased its character. But the leaking ceiling had been repaired. The aging oven had been replaced with a professional-grade model. The wobbly tables had been reinforced. New lighting, warm, golden, replaced the flickering fluorescence. The hand-painted sign outside had been carefully restored and weatherproofed. A note sat on the counter in familiar precise handwriting. I hope this doesn't count as controlling. J. Amara stood in her cafe, her mother's cafe, her dream, her sacrifice made physical, and placed her hand over her heart. You impossible man, she whispered. Then she tied on her apron and got to work. 3 weeks later. The Kong estate. Minjun turned 7. The cake had 7 layers. It was magnificent, a towering construction of Nigerian and Korean flavors that Amara and Minjun had designed together during his hospital recovery. Layer 1, chin chin crumble. Layer 2, red bean cream. Layer 3, plantain caramel. Layer 4, matcha sponge. Layer 5, coconut milk ganache. Layer 6, Korean cinnamon buttercream. Layer 7, puff puff crumble with gold leaf. It leaned slightly to the left. It was perfect. The party was small. Minjun's school friends. Suyun, Dr. Yoon and Nurse Cho. Sung-ho, who stood against the wall looking uncomfortable in civilian clothes, as if relaxation was a language he'd never learned. And Amara, who stood beside the cake with frosting on her apron and flour in her braids and a smile that could have powered the entire city. Minjun blew out his candles. What did you wish for? His friend Taewoo asked. I can't tell you. But, he looked at Amara. Then at his father. It already came true. That evening. After the guests left and Minjun was asleep, an exhausted, happy, healthy sleep, the sleep of a boy who had run and played and eaten cake and lived a day that his father had once feared he would never see, Jaehyun found Amara in the garden. She was sitting on the bench beside the koi pond, her shoes off, her feet tucked beneath her, looking at the stars. He sat beside her. For a long time they said nothing. The silence between them had changed over the months, from tense to cautious to comfortable and now to something else entirely. Intimate. The silence of two people who no longer need words to communicate. Daniel called me, she said. Jaehyun's jaw tightened fractionally. And? He got a job offer in New York. A senior editor position at a food magazine. He's leaving Seoul. Are you telling me this for a reason? I'm telling you because he said something before he hung up. She looked at Jaehyun. He said, he'd better deserve you. And I told him I wasn't sure. Jaehyun was very still. Are you sure now? He asked. Amara studied his face. The sharp jawline. The dark eyes that held oceans of unsaid things. The dragon climbing his neck like a declaration of everything he was. Powerful, dangerous, ancient in his loyalties, terrifying in his love. No, she said. But I don't think anyone ever fully deserves anyone. I think you just choose to show up. Every day. Even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. She paused. Can you do that? Yes. Even though I'm stubborn? Especially because you're stubborn. Even though I'll make you eat pastries every morning? Devastating sacrifice. Even though your world is dangerous and mine is flour and sugar and I will never be a person who fits into boardrooms and galas? He turned to her. He took both her hands. The tattoos on his fingers met her skin, the serpent and the peonies and the dragon's scale, all of them pressing against the warmth of a woman who had given his son life twice. My world is dangerous, he said. But you are the bravest person in it. You don't need to fit into boardrooms. You have built a kingdom out of flour and sugar and love, and it is worth more than anything I have ever constructed. He lifted her hand and pressed his lips against her knuckles, a gesture so tender from a man so dangerous that it felt like witnessing the impossible. I will show up, he said against her skin. Every day. For the rest of my life. Whether I deserve you or not. She cupped his face with her free hand. The serpent tattoo on his wrist rested against her jawline, the same spot it had traced on the night of their first kiss. Then stay, she said. He leaned forward. The kiss was different from the one on the veranda. That one had been desperation. This one was decision. Slow. Deliberate. A kiss that tasted like commitment. Like two people choosing each other with full knowledge of every complication, every danger, every beautiful, terrifying thing that lay ahead. The koi pond reflected the stars. The estate was quiet. And the world, for one perfect moment, was still. Fade to black. 4 months later. Spring. Seoul bloomed. Cherry blossoms erupted along the Han River like pink fireworks frozen in time. The city shed its winter armor and softened, streets filling with people, parks filling with families, the air carrying the specific sweetness of new beginnings. Minjun was healthy. Truly, permanently, miraculously healthy. Dr. Yoon's latest report confirmed full engraftment and complete remission of C7. The boy's blood counts were normal. His energy was boundless. He had gained weight, grown 2 centimeters, and developed an obsession with soccer that required Jae-hyun to install a goal net in the estate garden. He had also gotten the puppy. A golden retriever named Ao. Named after Amaraziyama, he explained to anyone who asked, with the confidence of a child who considers the matter settled. Ao's kitchen had transformed. Not into something unrecognizable, Amara would never allow that, but into something sustainable. The publicity from Daniel's article, combined with the quiet infrastructure improvements Jae-hyun had arranged, had turned the cafe into one of Seoul's most beloved small restaurants. There was a second location now, a larger space in Yongsan with a proper kitchen and a dining room where Amara hosted weekly cooking classes for immigrant women. She taught them to bake. She taught them to build. She taught them what her mother had taught her, that food is not just sustenance but language, and every dish is a sentence that says I am here, I matter, I will not disappear. Soo-yeon managed the original Mapogu location. She had been promoted, given a raise, and was now studying culinary arts at a university, tuition covered by a scholarship from the Kong Foundation, though Amara had insisted the paperwork never mention the name Kong. I don't need your money to validate my employees, she had told Jae-hyun. It's a foundation grant, he said. It's not my money. Whose name is on the foundation? Exactly. He had concealed his smile behind his coffee cup. She had caught it anyway. The press conference was Jae-hyun's idea. Amara had resisted. I don't need the world to know about us, she said. I don't need validation from strangers. This isn't about validation, he said. This is about protection. As long as our relationship is hidden, you're a vulnerability. A secret. Something my enemies can use. But if the world knows you're under the protection of the Kong name. I'm not under anyone's protection. I protect myself. He looked at her. You bit a man who tried to kidnap you. And I'd do it again. I know. That's why I love you. But the world needs to know. She considered. She argued. She negotiated. Finally she agreed, on one condition. I stand beside you. Not behind you. Not as a rescued woman or a protected asset. As your equal. You've always been my equal, Amara. Then act like it. The Kong Industries annual gala. A grand ballroom in Gangnam. 800 guests. Corporate leaders. Government officials. International investors. Media from 12 countries. And one pastry chef from Lagos. Amara wore a custom gown, Nigerian Ankara fabric reimagined in Korean haute couture design. Rich indigo and gold attire patterns swept into an elegant silhouette that honored both worlds she carried within her. Her mother's gold necklace rested at her collarbone. Her braids were styled in an intricate updo that framed her face like a crown. She was breathtaking. Jae-hyun wore a black tuxedo. The collar was precisely tailored to expose the dragon tattoo climbing his neck, a deliberate choice. He would not hide what he was. Not anymore. They entered together. The room went silent. 800 people, accustomed to power, to wealth, to spectacle, fell quiet as Kang Jae-hyun walked into the ballroom with a black woman on his arm and a look on his face that said challenge this and see what happens. No one challenged it. At the podium, Jae-hyun did not give a business speech. He did not discuss quarterly earnings or market projections or the 14% growth of the Kong investment portfolio. He talked about his son. About a blood disorder that had nearly killed him. About 4 years of anonymous blood donations. About a woman who gave a piece of herself every month without knowing who she was saving or why. The room was absolute silence. My son is alive, Jae-hyun said, his voice carrying through the ballroom with the authority of a man accustomed to being obeyed but choosing, tonight, to be vulnerable, because of the extraordinary selflessness of one person. A woman who crossed an ocean to build a life in a country that wasn't hers. A woman who kept a struggling cafe alive by selling pastries during the day and donating blood in the afternoon. A woman who, when she learned the truth, did not run, did not negotiate, did not hesitate. He turned to Amara, who stood beside the podium, her eyes glistening but her chin lifted, her posture straight. The posture of a woman who has never needed anyone's validation but has chosen, tonight, to accept their witness. She volunteered to save my son's life permanently. She gave her bone marrow. She gave her time. She gave her heart. He paused. The dragon tattoo pulsed. She gave my son a mother. The room held its breath. And she gave me something I had given up on ever finding again. He reached into his jacket pocket. He produced a small velvet box. 800 people gasped as one. Amara's eyes widened. Amara Okafor. He opened the box. Inside was a ring, a single, extraordinary stone set in a band of hammered gold, the design incorporating the same peony motif that marked his knuckle tattoos. Hidden wounds transformed into beauty. I am not a good man, he said. I have done things that keep other men awake at night. I have built my life on control and fear and the belief that love is a liability. He looked at her with those dark, devastating eyes. You proved me wrong. About everything. Amara's tears fell freely now. But she was smiling. She was radiant. She was every prayer her mother had ever whispered and every dream she had carried across 8,000 kilometers of ocean and every sacrifice she had made in a small kitchen in a foreign city. All of it, all of her, standing in a ballroom full of strangers who were witnessing something they would never forget. Marry me, he said. Not because I deserve you. Not because my son needs you. Not because my world requires your presence. Marry me because I love you. Completely. Desperately. Permanently. The ballroom waited. Amara stepped forward. She took the ring from the box with her own hand, she did not wait for him to place it, and slid it onto her finger. Yes, she said. But I'm keeping the cafe. 800 people erupted. The applause was thunderous. But Jaehyun didn't hear it. He heard only her. He pulled her toward him, one tattooed hand on the small of her back, the other cupping the side of her face, and he kissed her. In front of cameras. In front of power brokers and media and the entire glittering machinery of his public life. He kissed her like a man who had been holding his breath for 6 years and had finally been told he could exhale. In the front row. Minjun sat between Sung-ho and Dr. Yoon, wearing a tiny tuxedo and a grin so wide it seemed to split his face in half. He turned to Sung-ho and whispered, "Told you he'd fix it." Sung-ho, the most disciplined man in Jaehyun's organization, a man who had faced combat and interrogation and the full fury of the Shadow King without flinching, wiped his eye with the back of his hand. "Yes, you did," he said. 1 year later. The kitchen of the Kong estate smelled like magic. Chin-chin cooled on wire racks. Puff-puff drained on paper towels. Jollof arancini, Minjun's favorite fusion creation, sat golden and perfect in a ceramic bowl. A red bean cake cooled on the marble counter beside a vase of fresh peonies. Amara stood at the island, braids pinned up, apron dusted with flour, a smear of frosting on her collarbone, right where Jaehyun's storm cloud tattoo lived on his own body. She was humming. A Nigerian gospel song her mother used to sing while cooking, transposed into this Korean kitchen, this improbable life, this home. Minjun sat on the counter, something his father would never have allowed, but what Appa didn't know wouldn't hurt him, swinging his legs and eating chin-chin. He was 8 now. Taller. Stronger. Tanned from months of playing outdoors, soccer in the garden, swimming in the new pool, running with Ao the golden retriever, who had grown from a puppy into a large, clumsy, endlessly loyal companion. His latest blood work was clean. Completely clean. Dr. Yoon called it, the most successful C7 treatment outcome in medical history. There was talk of publishing a case study. Amara's bone marrow had been the key to everything. But Minjun didn't think about bone marrow. He thought about cake. "When's Appa coming home?" he asked. Soon. He had a meeting. He always has meetings. That's because he runs a very large company. "I'm going to run a bakery," Minjun announced. "A big one. With 7 locations. 1 for each layer of my birthday cake." Amara smiled. "You'll need a business plan. I'll make Appa write one. He's good at boring stuff." The front door opened. Jaehyun walked in. He was wearing a dark suit, as always, collar open, the dragon visible on his neck, the serpent winding down his wrist, the tattooed knuckles flexing as he loosened his tie. He looked like what he was, the most powerful man in Korea. But when he saw them, his wife at the kitchen island, his son on the counter, the golden retriever asleep beneath the table, the air thick with sugar and warmth and love, the power dissolved. The armor fell away. The Shadow King became a man walking into his kitchen at the end of a long day. "You're on the counter," he said to Minjun. Amara said I could. "I absolutely did not say that," Amara said. Minjun looked betrayed. "Traitor." Jaehyun crossed the kitchen. He kissed Minjun's forehead. He ruffled his hair. Then he moved to Amara and kissed her, properly, thoroughly, his tattooed hands sliding around her waist, his lips tasting the frosting on her mouth. "How was your day?" she asked. "Better now." "That's what you always say. Because it's always true." Minjun made a theatrical gagging sound. "Can you do that somewhere else?" "No," they said simultaneously. That night, after Minjun was asleep, the deep, peaceful sleep of a healthy child, a luxury they would never take for granted, Amara and Jaehyun sat on the veranda. The same veranda where they had first kissed. The same spot. The same stars. But everything else had changed. Amara leaned against him. His arm was around her shoulders, the dragon tattoo along his forearm resting against her back. Her mother's necklace caught the moonlight. His wedding ring, a hammered gold band matching hers, gleamed on his tattooed finger. "I called Neka today," Amara said. "How is she?" "She's coming to visit next month. She wants to see the cafe. The house." Minjun. Pause. "She's bringing Auntie Beezy. Should I be worried?" "Auntie Beezy will take one look at your tattoos and either run or try to exorcise you." "I'll wear a turtleneck." "You don't own a turtleneck." "I'll buy one." Amara laughed. The sound floated across the garden and mixed with the night air, becoming part of the estate, part of the world they had built together. Jaehyun tightened his arm around her. "Amara." "Yes." "Thank you." "For what?" "For donating blood to a program you knew nothing about. For walking into a clinic every month for 4 years. For giving a stranger's child the only thing that could save him. For forgiving a man who didn't deserve it. For staying when leaving would have been easier. For choosing this life, this complicated, dangerous, imperfect life, when you could have chosen something simpler." He pressed his lips against her temple. "Thank you for having warm hands." She turned her face into his chest. The storm cloud tattoo met her cheek. "My mother told me something once," she said. She said, "The people you are meant to love are the ones you find in the places you least expect. Not where the road takes you, but where the road breaks." She looked up at him. "You were where my road broke, Jaehyun. And I would break it again. 1,000 times. For you. For Minjun. For this." He held her. The Shadow King and the pastry chef. The dragon and the flower dust. The feared and the warm. Held together by the most improbable thread in the world. A rare blood type, a small cafe, a child's letter written in wobbly handwriting, and a love that had been operating in silence long before either of them knew it existed. The moon rose over the Kong estate. The koi swam in circles of silver. Somewhere inside, a golden retriever named after a dead woman's legacy slept beside a healthy boy who dreamed of 7-layer cakes and bakeries with 7 locations and a future so bright it made the stars look like practice. And in the garden, beneath the ancient trees, Kang Jae-hyun, billionaire, mafia sovereign, the man who never panicked, held the woman he loved and allowed himself at last to be still. Not the stillness of control. Not the stillness of strategy. The stillness of peace. Thank you for staying until the very end of this story. If it moved you, if you felt something for Amara, for Minjun, for a man who learned that love is not a weakness but the only strength that matters, then carry that feeling with you. Share it. Pass it on. Because the truth at the heart of this story is simple. Sometimes the people saving us are the ones we haven't met yet. And sometimes the greatest love stories begin not with grand gestures but with quiet, anonymous acts of kindness. A donation, a pastry, a warm hand held in a cold hospital room. You are someone's anonymous hero. Never forget that. Backhand index pointing right. Please like, share and subscribe.